Hello and welcome to Betterwix. Today's audiobook is I Decided to Live as Me by Suhyun Kim. As always, this is not the full book. It is my personal resources that I have learned from this book with my personal experiences. So if you are looking for the book, feel free to purchase the original book from the author. I am just sharing the materials that helped me with my personal growth. Without killing more time, let's get into it. I decided to live as me. We have all dreamed of being a superhero. But now, we have become adults who prioritize saving ourselves first over the world. We became adults of uncertainty, who grew up to an ambiguous age with an unimpressive career and vague skills. Are we maybe just pretending to be grown-ups? This book conveys a message of comfort and encouragement to the ordinary people in our time. No one knows the right answer in life. Without imitating or envying someone else's life, this book talks about how we can recognize and love who we are. With deep words of comfort and support, Suhyun Kim's fourth book of essays is here for you. Cheers to all of our ordinary yet beautiful lives. Earnest but not serious. Jolly but not shallow. I never studied in a private art academy, but I loved drawing, so I majored in design in college. I used to be between humanities and design studies, and right now I am both drawing and writing. I published 100% 20 years old, Goodbye, My 20, and 180 degree. Prologue. Come to think of it, I've always been curious about reasons. Even when I was a student, I always asked why. When my teacher would ask me to do something, people thought I was just being disobedient, but I only asked that because I really wanted to know the reason. It was so hard for me not to question and talk back. When I became an adult, I suddenly found myself feeling insignificant and helpless. A fuzzy age with fuzzy credentials and a fuzzy set of skills, I was a fuzzy person with nothing I could call my own and nothing to secure my future. What could have made me this fuzzy? I thought I did something wrong back then. Did I choose the wrong major? Did I not study hard enough during college? Did I not endure my job longer? But no matter how much I thought about it, I don't think I did anything wrong. Of course, I've had my share of mistakes and feeling lost and committing errors, but aren't trials and errors a natural part of life? Just like how I was curious about the reasons for my teacher's words, I wanted to know why someone who did nothing wrong felt so insignificant. I tried reading lots of books during that time, not because reading was my hobby, but because I really wanted to know why I've become insignificant, why I'm not enough, and why I'm nothing. And the ultimate conclusion I reached when I tried to look for the answers was that even if the world doesn't value my existence, I respect myself, and that is enough for me to live confidently as I am. This book is both the reason why I felt worthless and my response to the things that made me feel worthless. As I write this book, I like to think I'm giving some comfort and warmth to my readers, even if it's just for a short while. But what I really want is for this warmth and comfort to stay with them a bit longer. To someone like me in this indifferent world who blamed myself for nothing, I want to tell you we didn't do anything wrong. It's okay to live confidently as ourselves. Goal: for an ordinary person to stop being envious of something they are not, to endure the cold gaze of others, and to live as they really are. Part 1. Live with self-respect. To-do list: medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. Dead Poets Society. Don't be kind to those who aren't kind to you. I worked as an intern in a company right after graduating from college. The manager I met in the team I was assigned to treated me like a servant. I would call it Gap Jill. She not only asked me to move the monitor, which was already in front of her, 10 centimeters, but she also rebuked me with, "Do you want to get screwed over?" whenever I made small mistakes. I just continued working even if I didn't know what to do, since every move I made was subject to evaluation. Realizing that I was in the lowest position of that company, I spent that period of my life as a homo intern. This is a Korean term which refers to a person's abuse of power and position against someone of weaker status. Homo intern is a combination of the words homo and intern, and refers to the young ones who do internship work because they cannot get regular or full-time jobs. It wasn't the things she did to me that I couldn't accept, rather it was how I wasn't even able to show my emotions in those situations. She wasn't someone with great authority, but in those times that she acted so high and mighty, I kept quiet. And that made her treat me even worse. This might be a different case, but the ones who were tortured while fighting for democracy would say that the most painful part was not the suffering they were subjected to while being tortured, but their cowardice when they pretended to look fine despite being tortured. Even though it's not our fault, surrendering to injustice more than the injustice itself is the real fatal blow to one's self-esteem. Thus, to those who aren't kind to us, and to those who don't respect us, let's not bother showing any kindness to them. Even if we can't change the situation, let's at least not be cowardly in front of them. In order to preserve our dignity, we need to show even just the slightest hint of resistance. Gapgel is a joint product of a crude Gap who maltreats people, and a helpless Yule who can't even bother to demand at least respect. Don't worry about being miserable. When I just entered the new world of Instagram, I may be exaggerating a bit, but among the random photos shown in the feed, I saw a picture of a very sexy woman whose breasts were so large they reached down to her waist. Upon checking her feed, I saw what people call a luxurious essence. She was a woman with a pretty face, great body, surrounded with branded items, and always traveling. But what shocked me was not how different her life was from mine, but the many followers she had. Why on earth would so many people keep looking at this woman's life? I continued checking her feed out of curiosity, and the samgak kimbap I happily ate that morning suddenly seemed pathetic, while the OMG spangle bag worth 8,901 that I was so proud of now looked shabby. Literally, triangle kimbap. This is a triangle-shaped rice wrapped in dried seaweed and is prepared with a variety of fillings. Media allows us to take a peek at the lives of others, but those perfect-looking lives that we couldn't have known in the past make us curious and want to peek even more. But do we really not pay a price for this curiosity? In the book Ways to Make Yourself Miserable, it says that the easiest way to feel miserable is by taking a peek at the lives of others and comparing them to yours. It might be that we take a peek at the lives of others to satisfy our curiosity, and the price we pay for doing so is feeling miserable. But we don't gain anything by satisfying that curiosity. Our energy and curiosity should always be used only for taking care of our own lives. That is why we should be a friend to others instead of being a mere spectator of another person's life. Our own life should be more important than a few photos summarizing the lives of others. Don't force yourself to feel miserable. You lost not because you feel envy, but because you forgot what you have. Envy is devastating because it makes people think that what they have isn't important. Be proud of who you are. When I was a child, there was this TV program called Success Generation. The program showed stories of successful people. The protagonists changed every week, but the stories they told were always the same. They had a pitiable past and a successful present, which were always contrasted, while the show depicted the tremendous effort and unyielding determination needed to move from the past to the present. As I watched the program, I felt like I could overcome all sorts of tough circumstances and still succeed through persistent efforts. But as I got older, I realized the program was just teaching meritocracy. Anyone will succeed with ability and effort, just like what they say in self-development books. In reality, these two together are not the master key to success, but are just two of the many ways to succeed. The reason that formula for legendary success stories worked before was because it was during a time when the Korean economy was going through rapid development and everyone was more or less experiencing the same awful poverty with wealth. But it's different now. Nowadays, it's hard to find opportunities for one to move to a higher social class. The premise of meritocracy, or equal opportunity, is no longer true because the inheritance of parents' properties, background, and social class has taken its place. An individual's effort can't be ignored, but factors not related to one's ability like luck and background now determine many things. And while there are people who did succeed because of effort, these rare stories of rags to riches can't speak for the majority. Despite these changes, the formula still automatically equates with where poverty is blamed on one's lack of effort while discrimination and social class is further justified. They will say it's your fault that you are poor when there are endless opportunities, and that you can succeed if you try, instead of just talking about how unfair life is. This is why people are ashamed of being poor. Thus, they do all sorts of things so they don't look poor. People wear North Face or K2 jumpers as if they were about to climb the Himalayan mountains. In the same way, homeowners associations fuss over apartment brands that are supposed to sound luxurious. Although meritocracy is fictitious, as long as opportunities are unequal, the distorted meritocracy that was instilled by successful generations and self-help books determined whether we are rich or not. This places us somewhere in the middle of pride and shame. The term meritocracy was first coined by Michael Young in his book The Rise of Meritocracy. The book describes the future society with a fair system of meritocracy, but as one's intelligence and merit become the basis of hierarchy, it eventually changes to a ruthless society dominated by the elite groups, winner takes all, and law of the jungle principles. But when we actually look around us, are there really just a few rich people who took hold of great fortunes simply because of luck or inheritance? Are there also just a number of people who lived upright and with integrity despite being poor? Even if they didn't gain their riches through meritocracy, the wealthy ones remain secure in exploiting the marginalized. Is it not weird that the poor are ashamed of themselves even if they live with persistence and integrity? Despite being poor, you should feel pride and self-respect if you do your best and live honorably. In this world, there is shameful wealth and honorable poverty. Money is also about skill. This is what you call crime. Hate your parents. People blame your parents, though. How'd they earn that much money anyway? Don't let your life get hurt by passers-by. As I get older, I realize how difficult it is to find time and meet people who I would want to eat out with. There are so many passers-by whom I didn't like at all or weren't my type, like my high school classmate Eun Jae-young or Deputy Chief Park of the Financial Department. We get hurt, numb our hearts, and develop hatred dealing with these people's personal frustrations disguised as business-related, insults presented as worries, and rudeness posed as questions. What we waste is not a luxury brand bag that costs 2 times our salary or gossip about celebrities. What we waste is our emotions when we use our energy to deal with those who will soon disappear from our lives. Let us no longer waste our emotions for the superior we'll never meet once we quit the job, the relative we rarely stumble upon, the bitch who pisses us off with her smiling face, the shrewd batchmate who pretends to be dumb, and everyone else in our lives who are nothing. Even if we numb our hearts, moan to ourselves, and hate these people, they are just passers-by in our lives. Eliminate numbers from your life. Here are the criteria of the middle class in different countries. United Kingdom, fair play. Have your own opinion and principles. Don't be self-righteous. Support the weak and confront the strong. Firmly handle injustice, complaint, and unlawfulness. France, speak at least one foreign language and equip yourself with broader world experiences. Enjoy more than one sport and musical instrument. Create your own recipe and treat your guests. Join a social volunteer organization. Discipline someone else's children just like your own. South Korea, 99 square meter apartment without liabilities. Monthly income higher than 5 million won. 2,000 cubic centimeters sedan. Bank account with more than 1 billion won. Several trips abroad every year. Compared to the criteria of the UK and France, South Korea's criteria have one thing in common: numbers. One time, I was web surfing and found an online advertisement that said, "Your marriage potential score." I thought it was a fortune-telling site, but it turned out to be a dating agency. If you register your age, height, weight, assets, and net income, they will show your marriage potential score the way they rate beef. This must be a Korean-style AlphaGo. We love rating everything with numbers and also take our ratings for granted. In this number-filled life, individuals struggle to gain more numbers to add to their resume, decide relationships according to apartment size, and read headlines which describe strikes or demonstrations by profit loss rather than conflict of values. This really is a life of numbers, where only prices are asked for and values are forgotten. Numbers are always easy to compare and rank. For example, it isn't possible to rank a triangle against a circle, but anyone can rank 1 against 2. In fact, the life of numbers is endless comparison and ranking. In this life, we worry about our worth being graded low, so we constantly check our position and ranking. Can everything in our life be measured in numbers? IQ can't measure wisdom, the number of friends can't prove the depth of relationship, the size of one's apartment doesn't guarantee a harmonious family relationship, and net income can't represent someone's personality. True value isn't measured in numbers. Therefore, if you want to be incomparable rather than superior, you should eliminate numbers from your life. What is truly important in our life lies beyond numbers. Who are you without numbers? Age, TOEIC score, school grade, net income, weight, apartment size, height, school ranking. Don't be swayed by what others say. Through this, I got closer to one of my readers, Youngmi. She is a lovely and warm person who read my previous book. She has a very sweet boyfriend. She would write her love story on us, and I felt like this couple's love can revitalize even dead love hormones. But one day, a total stranger left a comment that she should stop posting and think of others who feel miserable. There are indeed excessive show-offs in this, but I swear she isn't one of them. She just wrote about her simple happiness. When she saw the comment, she was worried that she did something wrong. But the problem was with the unsolved personal issues of the person who commented on the post. We sometimes meet people who misinterpret, distort, and criticize our intentions. Those who make hate comments on SNS expand their territory into our daily lives. Here are some suggestions on how to deal with those talkative people when they make judgmental statements. First, the comment is merely a subjective opinion of an individual who isn't King Solomon or Freud. Second, if they criticize you, you should look into the truth of the statement instead of getting sad or angry. If the criticism is true, take it as an opportunity to change your bad habits. If it is false and that person made a wrong judgment, don't take it seriously. Third, if they continue to badger you, don't keep quiet but instead, ask them to be responsible for what they said. Charge for defamation? No, for causing noise pollution. Send back. How to use. Show this page to those loudmouth people. Note, you aren't worth talking to. Don't insult others. Someone published an SNS post with a misspelled word and many people commented that it was their pet peeve. It means extreme hate, but I can't understand why people have to extremely hate misspelling a word. A spelling mistake doesn't insult King Sejong the Great, and even if the person didn't really know the correct spelling, does his mistake really deserve extreme hatred? So many hateful and insulting words are in our daily life: pet peeves, disgusting middle-aged men, trashy journalists, nonsense ad-lib, kimchi warriors, parasitic mothers, gold diggers, fags. These words show how we can hate each other so easily. The cause of this aversion is the collapse of the middle class. People who are anxious about their position try to get back their socioeconomic status by getting rid of someone else's. But is that all? Interpreting it only in this way isn't enough because this treatment is experienced by different types of people. In my case, I'm called a shallow kimchi girl because I was born a Korean woman. If I get married, I'll be labeled a stupid wife, useless mother, and nonsense spooter. It's so hard for Koreans to live without being labeled. The author of Humiliation, Professor Chan-ho Kim, said that the way people satisfy their eagerness to be recognized in society is to humiliate other people. In other words, people humiliate others to validate their existence and compensate their feelings of inferiority with this taste of superiority. It's pathetic. These douchebags unite because of hatred. They hide their dorkiness and select only the information they want to show even though they've never experienced it, and they magnify distorted images of other people. The victims of this humiliation repeat the same hatred against others. As a result, the internet becomes a battlefield between who is more hateful. At the end of this battle, are they going to feel relieved when they end up concluding that everyone except for me is disgusting? We will just end up more cautious and sensitive since we fear being surrounded by disgusting human beings, knowing that this can lead to us being made fun of and hated. Listen to me. No one finds happiness in a world where people attack each other. People who insult others are losers. Inside the lift, a baby carried by a mother suddenly burst out crying. The mother was embarrassed and tried to calm down the baby. She was so conscious of the other people. I told her, "It's okay. I won't insult you for no reason. It's really okay. Don't make excuses for yourself." I recently got to hear from a person who was an activist during his college days. He graduated from a prestigious university but didn't get a decent job because of his activist past. He hated capitalism and didn't try to find a job because he felt that society was illogical. He didn't work until he was beyond 40 years old and ended up depending on his mother, who was a cleaning lady. Anyone would say his logic is full of loopholes. He criticized the social system where laborers are exploited by capitalists, but he was doing the same to his mother. No one could understand why he didn't pity his mother and just try to get a job. What on earth really made him this way? I suppose he must have had high expectations for himself after graduating from a prestigious university. How frustrated and helpless he must have felt when he was denied by society because of his activist past. On top of that, the fact that he failed to be economically independent must have humiliated him and fatally damaged his ego. Humiliation and insignificance are the feelings that people find hardest to endure. And so they tend to protect themselves with sarcasm, blame external factors, and explain their side by giving feeble excuses. But the thing is, you can't protect yourself with excuses. This is because you yourself are not convinced by the excuses you make to defend yourself. Your ego still suffers from a sense of insignificance and humiliation even if you pretend it doesn't. In her essay Human Landscape, novelist Suhyun Kim wrote that the antonym of love isn't hate or fury, but indifference. Likewise, the antonym of life isn't death or regression, it's our defensive nature, which makes people avoid reality. For a long time, he also avoided reality. Maybe he thought it was better to display his sophisticated resistance instead of just facing the reality that made him feel insignificant and humiliated. Maybe he was afraid of getting hurt by the unreasonable world. But you shouldn't waste your entire life because of nostalgia. Whatever reason, you should get rid of self-blame and resentment. You have to look at yourself simply as you are. He should first be proud of himself for attempting to make a better world, and second, accept his frustrated dreams. What's pathetic and humiliating isn't that he didn't get a good job or succeed, but that he didn't do anything except make excuses. Even if we don't become what we expect to become, even if we have to bear the feeling of being insignificant, we should face our true selves and not make excuses. What's most important is that at the end of that encounter lies your new beginning. What's important is that you free yourself from your inner anger. Remember that no one lives a perfect life. When I was a third-year middle school student, a male classmate told me, "You don't have any problems at all." I was the talkative and active type, so I guess that quiet classmate envied me. But during that time, I was suffering a syndrome called sophomoric illness, and I was tormented by the conflict between my parents. I envied another friend who seemed to have no worries. She was pretty and everyone wanted to be friends with her. But after a few years, when that girl and I got close, she said that she had the hardest time when she was in third-year middle school because of prejudice and discrimination from teachers. It was unbelievable. That male classmate and I were so wrong. Whenever we see someone who has things that we lack, we think they live a perfect life. But how much do we actually know about others? In the last episode of Age of Youth by the writer Yunseon Park, as the main character Jin Myung was embarking on her month-long trip to China, the airport staff whispered to each other while looking at her, saying, "I envy her," and, "You better pray to be born from rich parents in your next life." But what really happened was that she aimlessly planned the trip using all her assets worth 1.7 million won when her younger sibling died after suffering from a coma of 6 years. We try to gauge the weight of others' lives just by looking at what we can observe, but just like how other people's perception of us isn't all that we are, how we see other people isn't a reflection of who they are as well. We all have our own pain and shortcomings, and no one lives an undamaged life. That is why the truth you have to know is that no one lives a perfect life. At times, that truth can comfort us. One friend suddenly sent a KakaoTalk message saying, "I think you are always working hard. You inspire me all the time." At that time, I was just actually lying face down and tracking my online shopping delivery. A wound's perspective. Those that are near look big while those that are far appear small. Be completely happy as an ordinary person. When I was young, I thought the sun was following me every time I rode a car. I also thought that one day, I might become a magical woman like Sailor Moon. Of course, if I continued to think like this even after becoming an adult, I would be diagnosed with severe megalomania. But when I grew up, even if I couldn't be a hero who saves the world from evil forces, I imagined that I could still be somewhat special. But I grew up to be an ordinary adult. I don't have a fancy life, nor do I enjoy unlimited freedom. It's still difficult for me to afford beef, and my dull life has become a routine. But when we think about it, the time when you realize you've become an ordinary adult, and the time when you let go of the ideals you had when you were younger, I suppose that's also the time when an adult's puberty starts. Of course, that moment can be both bitter and sad. But to be free from the fantasies and expectations you had as a child, and to live your life not as an extraordinary person but as an ordinary one, might actually be our task as adults. I will never save the world like Sailor Moon or be a professor in the Paris-Sorbonne University. I don't expect my schoolmates to be jealous about my life or my relatives to admire me as someone who brings honor to our family. Instead, I want to write, paint, and design. I want to spend more time with my family, learn how to swim so I can fully enjoy the beach, and expand my world by meeting people with different views in life. Despite many restrictions and lack of assurance, my not-so-special life still allows me to do many things. The puberty stage of an adult starts by accepting one's ordinariness and ends when one fills up his or her ordinary life. At that moment, we all become true adults. The truth about Salieri Complex. There is no evidence that Mozart was happier than Salieri. Don't allow others to judge you. A guy my friend had a blind date with asked her what sports she liked. He asked whether she liked golf or horseback riding. This wasn't actually a question about her hobbies, but about her economic status. For men and women alike, it isn't wrong to look at one's economic status. I admit that I also consider this important. But giving importance to how one lives their life and reducing their life to numbers for calculation are two different things. There are those who cut off contact when they learn about the other person's residence, and those who speak a lot only to get to know what the other person's parents do. In front of these kinds of people, one could get really anxious about being evaluated like a child who has submitted an exam. But if we think about it, do we really need to be so anxious? For me, no matter how competent someone is, if that person is obsessed with numbers, I don't find them attractive at all because it's like they view life's happiness as trivial. In short, he's not my type. Thus, just like I don't deserve him, he doesn't deserve me either. What I need is someone like me, not those kinds of people. They're not the only ones who can judge me. So what if someone judges me based on numbers? Are they kidding? Anyhow, all you idiots are unqualified. Don't humble yourself to the point of being intimidated. After publishing a book, my friends would sometimes call me Author Kim. It's just a joke among us friends, but I don't consider myself an author. Even though the dictionary meaning of the word author is someone who creates stories or illustrations, I was always shy and awkward when it comes to an author's credentials. I happened to learn about this anecdote from a certain traveler. This traveler met a bartender in Europe who introduced himself as a poet. The traveler asked, "Have you published any poetry books?" The bartender answered, "No. I haven't published any poetry books, but I'm a poet because I write poems." Why is it that I feel awkward being called an author even after publishing a number of books when someone who hasn't even published one poetry book confidently refers to himself as a poet? It could be individual differences, but there is also the presence of a huge cultural difference. This difference can be found in public education. In the West, where one's individuality and autonomy are given importance, people are taught to think of themselves as unique. For example, in Richard Nisbet's The Geography of Thought, How Asians and Westerners Think Differently, and Why, he wrote about a dispute in his hometown on what is the more important goal of education, passing on knowledge or building one's confidence. Although it sounds trivial for us, building one's confidence is as important as passing on knowledge to others when it comes to the purpose of education. For us, our society is relationship-oriented, so it gives more importance to harmony than one's individuality. Because of this, as soon as we enter elementary school, the first thing we learn about is forming relationships in the subject, values education. Actually, this doesn't need to be taught separately. To make it short, it just means don't fight with family, friends, neighbors, or anyone else. Instead, get along with them. We were taught to listen and be more concerned about others' thoughts and feelings instead of valuing ourselves and respecting our own emotions. This is evident in Korean culture, The term nunchi has no single counterpart in the English language. Westerners also find the Korean sense of humility almost like belittling oneself. As a result of this long-term training, we are constantly doubtful about our own credentials. We make the best use of our nunchi and humility in order to get along with others and never get to heed to know yourself. Of course, humility and being considerate of others' feelings are both virtues. But it can never be a virtue if we fail to take care of our own feelings while minding how others feel. Thus, don't be so conscious of others to the point of exhaustion, and don't humble yourself to the point of being intimidated. The person that you always have to respect is no one else but yourself. We need a bit of confidence out of nowhere and a holy shit, this is my life mentality. Speak up for your right to respect your own life. I read a post online where the writer was a part-time worker in a restaurant. One ajumma customer referred to the writer and told her daughter, "You'll end up like that if you don't study hard." The writer felt so frustrated and defeated for no reason. She was just doing part-time work to gain experience, and her coworkers were all from prestigious universities too. Just in time, Chinese customers entered the store and she was able to take their orders in fluent Chinese because she had studied in China. Seeing her, the ajumma was surprised and embarrassed. Everyone who read this post criticized the ajumma. But how different was the working student from the ajumma? She kept highlighting that she was not a blue-collar laborer but just a part-timer who wanted to gain some experience. Her desperate protest was focused on, "I don't deserve that kind of treatment," rather than on the ajumma's words. In short, she felt the treatment was unfair. She just wanted to gain experience from the part-time work and was totally different from those who ended up like that because they didn't study hard. We sometimes encounter triggering phrases on the internet. Would you like to go on a meeting or do mishing in a factory? Those who belong to academic ranks 1, 3 order chicken, those in ranks 4, 6 fry the chicken, while those in rank 7, 9 make the delivery. At first glance, it sounds witty. But this text makes us look at sewers in the factory and hard labor as miserable, as if they were punished for not excelling in school. It also equips us with the mindset of neglecting and discriminating against laborers. This discrimination is deeply rooted in our society. In the old dynasties, government officials put themselves above people. This practice has now upgraded to a new modern version through capitalism. This mindset never decreases the wage gap but rather strengthens social discrimination. So what's the problem? The problem can't be solved simply by a humanitarian perspective that believes that everyone is equal. If children are told that they'll end up like those people, if they don't study hard and are exposed to thought-provoking phrases, obviously they will dream of becoming like the successful businessmen and businesswomen they watch in soap operas. But in reality, many people work as physical laborers and occupy subordinate positions in a regular workplace. How can these people who dreamt of a life in a soap opera accept the reality that they're now actually living the life they used to look down on? Both their dreams of grandeur and their discriminatory mindset will fill them with shame when they realize they've turned out to be ordinary. They can't accept that they aren't any different from others. Unity among the labor classes isn't easy because of this self-disgust. Discrimination and spite towards laborers also take place in another way. They always have discrimination and contempt in their heads, so they try their best to not end up as a sewer in a factory or a chicken delivery staff. They don't feel joy or curiosity towards learning. Their motivation to study is their anxiety on failure and fear of being ignored. When this feeling weakens, all they do is read other thought-provoking phrases to recharge their anxiety. Temporary anxiety boosts their motivation and increases efficiency. But when what's left is only anxiety and nervousness, they end up suffering from chronic fatigue, which no medicine can cure. The words parents used to tell their children to wish their happiness eventually trap their children into chronic anxiety. If you've reached what you aimed for, will everything be all right? Achievement earned through discrimination and despite leads to arrogance. Arrogance without inner strength is like standing up on a skyscraper without any safety equipment. It will lead you to constantly experience acrophobia, a heightened fear of falling. The more arrogant you are, the greater the shock when you fall. Chosen Daily chief columnist, Gyude Lee, explained it well. According to him, Europeans naturally step down when situations or circumstances change. But Koreans never do the same in the face of changes. They feel desperate and miserable when they are left with no choice but to step down. There are so many ways to live, but stepping down is a tragic fall for those who have internalized discrimination and spite. Discrimination brings humiliation to those who are discriminated against, and nervousness to those who discriminate. In the end, it doesn't help anyone. If you continuously charge yourself with anxiety, or if you feel ashamed for living a life far from what you actually dreamed of, you should make yourself aware of your situation. Even if you deliver chicken or sew in a factory, we live in so many ways, and none of these lives are at fault. Live to the fullest, learn all the things you want. But no one can insult anyone's life. We all have the right to respect each and everyone's own life. In order to live like myself, I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I am not. Kurt Cobain. Strengthen your self-esteem. Alain de Botton said becoming an adult is positioning ourselves in a world dominated by materialistic and cruel people. Life is not a fairy tale. Discrimination is rampant in our society. Although we are furious about power tripping and try to be firm and care less about materialistic interests, our minds can be crushed completely like a biscuit in a pocket. This is why people say we have to increase our self-esteem. You have to respect yourself regardless of others' standards and assessment. Yes, I get it. It's easier said than done. Self-esteem is basically affected by childhood experiences and parental child rearing. If you lack attachments to your parents or experience abuse, bullying, and criticism, your self-esteem may be negatively affected. But self-esteem influenced by childhood experiences doesn't last forever. It changes over time. The first psychologist to examine the theory of self-esteem was Nathaniel Branden. He said that self-esteem is made up of two main components: self-efficacy and self-respect. Self-efficacy is the trust and confidence you have in yourself that allows you to face realistic problems and take care of yourself. Self-respect is honoring yourself and believing you deserve to be loved. But are we living in a society where we can properly protect our self-esteem? Even though we may grow up with healthy self-esteem, we are treated like products of a company and driven out as dozens of our resumes are rejected, making it difficult for us to feel the self-esteem we need to keep us going. It's almost like we need hypnosis to force people to respect themselves while they live in a society where people are ranked according to qualifications and everyone is made to discriminate against others. The world is changing into a place where we can't stand without self-esteem, but it has also become even more difficult for individuals to develop it. How then can we solve this endless issue of self-esteem and secure our space in this cruel society? This should be approached in two ways. First, you have to strengthen the very foundation of social respect. Respect shouldn't have to be a consumable commodity. It doesn't cost money anyway. If respect is public property and accessible to everyone, we shouldn't have to beg for it. That's why we have to make it more accessible. Let us fuel each other's respect. It shouldn't be selective respect according to rank, annual income, profession, or physical appearance, but an unconditional equal respect for myself as well as for others. Second, individuals have to fully understand their self-esteem and practice it. To do this, we have to define genuine self-esteem and understand its meaning. Self-esteem isn't rooted in superiority, preening yourself, or the temporary satisfaction gained from being loved or accepted by someone. The essence of self-esteem is self-trust, self-respect, and believing that you deserve happiness. It isn't achieved through spiritual triumph. We can't trust ourselves without doing anything, and we can't practice self-respect if we live against our principles. Self-esteem is an inner power that grows through a series of life choices, actions, and responsibilities, all based on principles we developed ourselves. But here's the thing. The EBS documentary program My Kids' Personal Life experimented on how parents' attitudes can affect children's self-esteem. The participating children were given puzzles. Parents of kids with low self-esteem solved the puzzles for their children, while parents of kids with high self-esteem waited until their children could solve the puzzles. Self-trust and self-respect, which are essential components of self-esteem, can be achieved when we solve our problems and successfully reach our goals. As shown in the experiment, the most important thing is that you become your own agent. You aren't fully aware of yourself if you are dragged by the attention of others. If we haven't fully understood ourselves and are too concerned about how others see us, we can't gain self-esteem. What we need to develop solid self-esteem is clear. Be yourself. Let us now see how to live according to who we are. You lose control of your life if you beg to earn self-esteem through other people. Live as who you are. When the male protagonist of a drama says, "Why are you being so unlike you?" the female protagonist replies with surprise, "What is it to be like me then?" We know what it is to live like me, but I absolutely have no idea what really is like me. Why can't we determine what it is to be like who we are? Psychologist James Marcia classified people's identity into 4 types depending on the ego identity's degree of accomplishment. These 4 types include identity achievement, identity moratorium, identity diffusion, and identity foreclosure. According to a study, most Koreans belong to the identity foreclosure or those who have a low sense of identity. Those in the identity foreclosure status are devoted to conforming with the ways of the society they are brought up in. According to the theory, the reason for this low sense of identity is the absence of crisis. One would probably argue about the absence of crisis, but the crisis being described here isn't that of being a victim of voice phishing or having one's card declined in front of a blind date. Instead, the crisis here is never questioning yourself and fighting for your goals, values, and beliefs in life. Why weren't we able to fight? The reason begins with a culture that doesn't encourage us to explore and question ourselves. In Confucianism, or the traditional core of our morality, an individual is regarded as interdependent with his or her relationships and surroundings. One's identity is determined by one's role in society, while learning and carrying out one's duty is more important than exploring and questioning oneself. A life is deemed beautiful if it can meet society's expectations. Thus, we tend to live trying to meet the standards of our society and parents rather than our own philosophy and way of life. This results in many people not being able to come up with their own beliefs and philosophy, thus not having a clear idea about themselves. Instead, they'll end up writing a fictional account about themselves instead of a personal statement. What makes never facing this issue until the end so critical is severe dependence. When I was a child, "You should obey adults because you're young," conditioned me to think that children are weak and inferior beings. Many parents don't let their children be independent, so they end up denying them the process of becoming mature adults because of these children's weakness and inferiority. Those who become adults without maturing look for mentors even as they age because they're afraid to make decisions on their own. Even Haemin Sunim or Baya Han wouldn't be able to tell what kind of person you are. Living as I am means understanding myself and making my own decisions in the midst of experiences and searching. Becoming a freelancer doesn't mean I live like myself. Neither does having my own taste mean I live like myself. Living like myself means making my own decisions based on how I understand myself. To start off, you should pay attention to yourself. Writing about yourself would be a good way to start. Let's pay attention to ourselves, how we've lived until now, what values we want to live by, what makes us happy, how we are different from others. Let's look for what we are. Of course, this will require a lot of sincerity and effort. You might also be afraid of giving up your dependence on others. But once you've passed through those moments of worries and crises, a life where you believe and respect yourself will finally start. The independent children that adults refer to are actually those who just do the things they've been asked to do. Don't delay your questions about life. In the midst of intense competition, first we study, then go to university, improve our qualifications, and then earn money. We became adults that way, under pressure from the things we have to do from morning to evening, from spring to winter. And suddenly someone will say this, "I don't know what I like to do." I want to ask them, have you ever done something because you just wanted to? In a TV program that studies children's identity and self-esteem, a so-called kind child who always helps people around him was featured. The production team asked this child what he likes doing, and he answered, "Run errands for my mom," and "help my dad wash his car." When this child was asked to answer not about the things he does for others but what he really likes doing, he had a hard time coming up with an answer. Instead of finding out what they want to do in the course of their life, people who suppress their desires in order to do what they have to do lose sense of what they like. what they want, and eventually, who they are. Their life remains in the spectrum of the unknown since they're never able to discover the kind of life they want. If you don't want this to happen to you, you have to rediscover what you like to gain a sense of yourself and refrain from only doing things that you have to do. It's now time for you to answer the life questions you have delayed answering. Question the obvious. In a village, there once lived a couple, their 1-year-old son, and the husband's mother. When the daughter-in-law came home at lunchtime after working in the field, her mother-in-law, who was suffering from Alzheimer's, said she had prepared rice chicken porridge. The daughter-in-law opened the cauldron gratefully, but what she saw inside wasn't a chicken, but her own son. Her senile mother-in-law thought her son was a chicken, put him in the cauldron, and boiled him to death. The daughter-in-law then pulled herself together, caught a real chicken, boiled porridge for her mother-in-law, and then buried her son on the mountain behind their house. This story of a child's death, which was featured in the TV program How Is That Possible, was surprisingly a touching story of a devoted daughter-in-law during the Joseon dynasty. Why was this story, which definitely no one would understand now, so treasured? During that time, virtue meant the extreme suppression of one's feelings and the performance of all obligations in the name of duty. This was the reigning ideology that mandated sacrifice to achieve harmony even if one already felt a surge of anger. The virtue I was encouraged to practice when I was young was diligence. They gave a perfect attendance award to those who didn't miss a single class despite the bad weather, getting sick, or being injured. Above the blackboard used to hang a frame with the class motto, diligence. Diligence was taught as the best virtue because our society was manufacture-based. In manufacturing, the qualities most needed aren't creativity nor individuality, but rather diligence and sincerity. Through those selected, touching stories and virtues, the daughter-in-law who didn't even shed a tear even after her son was boiled to death wasn't accused of being a heartless accomplice in her child's murder, but was instead regarded as a filial daughter-in-law. The child who attends class despite a burning fever becomes a model student, a groundless rumor claiming Socrates said, "A law is a law, however undesirable it may be," spreads, and murdering one's daughter who dated for love is regarded honorable in an Islamic country. That's how a norm selected to be taught as a virtue by society can sometimes turn a scary story into a beautiful one, and acts of abuse to acts of honor. But even so, we continue to live thinking that society's virtues and norms are absolute truth. But values depend on individual choices, and in order for us to sustain life, it isn't the norms that are crucial but the beliefs we built ourselves. So what should we do? According to someone who went to the USA to study economics, there was a class called Brainwashing Class. As the course name suggests, it was a class that claimed everything the students had learned about economics was wrong, so they had to cleanse their minds. When others learned economic theories from globally renowned scholars, they discovered errors in the existing theories, and thus, were able to find new answers. Let's question the norm. Let's ask whether the things we've been believing all this time is really the voice inside us or the voice of others, which we follow without any doubts. When we question the norm we believe, we can move forward. In order for us to replace the norms in our minds with our own beliefs, we also need a brainwashing class. Recently, on a website managed by the Ministry of Employment and Labor, the story of Deputy Section Chief Kim who met with a buyer while on holiday was greatly praised. Not only is it enough to sue the company for interrupting the employee's personal life on vacation, the story's a useless act. Kids nowadays lack slave spirit. Don't live to meet the expectations of others. I'm not a company worker. It's not that I have aspirations or great determinations, but I wanted to write, so I decided I would think about looking for a workplace only after writing my book. One day, I wondered, how was I able to make that important decision so easily? I realized that I was able to do that because of the way my parents raised me. Throughout my whole life, my parents never forced anything on me, but they did advise me when I had to decide on something. In the end, though, they let me do whatever I decided. Even if I didn't study and just read comics until I was in middle school, they never compared me to my older sister who was a consistent honor student. So I was never afraid of not being accepted by my parents while learning to make decisions on my own. But even so, I was still burdened by the thought that I needed to make them proud of me. I got rid of that pressure when I realized that carrying that huge burden didn't translate to loving them more. When I was in my mid-20s, I told my parents, "Forget all your expectations about me and just think of me as a boarder." Of course, they scolded me, asking how those words could come out of my mouth when they did their best to raise me. But even after that, I told them to think of me that way. Of course, I wanted to be a typical model daughter. I also wanted to prove to my parents that life is better off having children and thus, resolved to do my best even if it is impossible. They are the most important people to me. But I know my parents wouldn't be happy if I'm burdened and worrying myself sick wondering whether I'm disappointing them. What isn't for me just isn't for me. Only we can take responsibility for our own lives as an individual. Our life may or may not meet our parents' expectations, but living in order to satisfy those expectations is not love but simply feeling in debt and pressured. If we are responsible for our own life, then it is for our parents to realize that we can't always live the way they want us to. If what bothers you is the financial support your parents provided, then you should work hard and repay them. We can be real boarders only if we pay the rent. But let us not pawn our lives. The only ones who have to live up to our expectations are ourselves. My plot, my way. Don't be anyone else but yourself. When I was a grade 2 student, we discussed our dream. I heard about Madame Curie somewhere, and I said I would like to be a scientist like her. Ever since I was conceived in my mom's womb, I've never been into science, but I was just bluffing because I was a second grader. It's stranger if a small kid says she would like to be in the procurement department or become an accountant in SME. The problem occurs when our dream growing up is not what we will do, but what we will become. I once talked to a dermatologist who was a graduate of a medical school in Seoul and running a dermatology clinic in Gangnam. While I was talking with the doctor, I didn't feel any unique personality or philosophy from him. Instead, I felt like he was a child, still growing up. Abruptly, I asked him if he was happy. He responded to me without hesitation, "No." Others may admire him for having a good job, but he regretted that he wasn't from a better university and working for a bigger hospital. Many books say a lot of people who are socially acknowledged aren't actually happy, and he was one of them. He devoted his adolescence to studying and entered medical school because he just could. He didn't have the time to think of anything else and was occupied with hectic study and his medical intern position. Why isn't he happy? While he was chasing after a stable socioeconomic status and recognition, he didn't have a chance to see his inner self. This eventually made him feel empty. What was important to him was being a doctor. He depended on his professional identity in order to compensate for his empty inner self and insignificant identity. But he was still unhappy. He thought everything would be all right once he became a doctor, but he found himself caught by his own desire for higher income and working for a bigger hospital. His inner self was still empty and no materialistic means could fully satisfy it. A job is not just about making a living. It makes someone become more of oneself, rather than creating a new self. You can roll a snowball only if you have some snow. If you chase external values without looking at your inner self, you'll always live with comparisons and never reach real happiness and self-respect. What is crucial for us isn't a business card to show our credentials, but to become ourselves, which we don't need to prove to others. Don't succumb to the prescribed answers. In a coffee shop, I accidentally had a conversation with a Canadian who was teaching English in a local grade school. She shared one thing she found strange in Korea, and it was how Koreans think that smart students are good students. She thinks students who aren't academically excellent can also be called good students, while those that are academically excellent aren't necessarily called good ones. She was questioning the usual prescribed logic of smart equals good. Good life also has an embedded similar context. Good life consists of physical health, good interpersonal relations, eye for enjoying art and philosophy, and feeling fulfilled from work. But for Koreans, good life and well-being are only interpreted as being rich. Why are we programmed to follow only one standard while forgetting all the other values? Perhaps the Korean War and anti-communism ideology may have heavily influenced this mindset. Koreans detested more invasions or frustrations. They were made to follow the uniform top-down control and military culture such as hair length regulations or curfew. Anti-communism ideology didn't allow any other opinions. Collectivism forced this one uniform way, and enduring this was a way of survival for Koreans. This lifestyle passed on from generation to generation. Striving for quantified goals like $100 billion export, $100 billion profit, settled into the life of individuals in ways such as 5 kilograms weight loss and 900-point TOEIC scores, and our monolithic society manifests through individuals chasing the same goal. This is why we are forced to have 17% body fat, 48 kilograms in weight, a positive and polite attitude, education in a prestigious college, and a position in the conglomerate. While promoting this high-standard uniform goal, excessive compliments are given to the prescribed way of living and outspoken insults are given to non-conforming ways. An individual who happens to live in a non-conforming way has to put up with being called inappropriate. In consequence, what's left with us is a sick society consisting of a few arrogant yet model individuals and a huge number of inferior non-conforming ones. British journalist Daniel Tudor assessed Korea as the impossible country since it pressures its people to follow impossible standards in terms of education, dignity, physical appearance, and professional achievement. Can the ideal self possibly exist like this? Not everyone can be skinny, have a pleasing personality, graduate from a prestigious college, and enter the conglomerate. If it's even possible, it must be an abnormal planet like Galaxy 999 Express. If society or the world dictates only one answer, you should ask why. You shouldn't succumb to the unacceptable standard or feel cowed by it and end up depreciating your own value. There are various ways to define good students, various ways to live a good life, and we all have a right to pursue our own answers. We aren't wrong. We just have different answers. The ones who think that only heavy metal music is true music may demand it from the Beatles, but even without heavy metal, the Beatles is still the Beatles. Develop discernment. When I was in my early 20s, I once read a book on things to do in life. One of the chapters advised that we need to buy a set of good clothes rather than several inexpensive ones. After some time, I remembered that advice while looking at my wardrobe. Inside was the winter coat I thoughtlessly bought because it was for sale, a skirt I bought just because of its model, and bold styles that my mother wouldn't allow me to wear outside. So did I regret what I bought? Not really. It was when I tried out different styles and failed that I developed my own discerning eye and preference for clothes. If you also failed several times, it means you struggled to find clothes that suit you well. So let us find the one that fits us the most through a discerning eye and taste, which results from a number of failures. Life is like looking for a good quality set of clothes that suits us the best. Bobbed hair fits her, the dandy look suits him, apricot blush is the best for me, all these we discover by trying anew. A monolithic way of life breeds self-misunderstanding, but experience leads to understanding oneself. Decide for yourself. Like what one philosopher said, life is C between B and D. Our life is determined by the decisions we make. But there are some people who find it particularly difficult to make decisions. Being prudent and being indecisive are totally different, so why do they find it hard to make a decision? It may be caused by self-obsession to make the perfect choice, but it is usually due to lack of self-trust. You don't trust yourself to make a decision and you aren't confident enough to be responsible for that decision, so you wait for someone else to teach you the right choice or delay until the problem gets worse. But it's not just a matter of wasting time. Like how Nathaniel Branden put it, decisions accumulated deep in our minds will result in developing self-respect. Each decision you make on your own will develop into self-respect. Pausa. Self-trust to control one's own life is gained when you make the best decision and are responsible for whatever consequences you will face. It is more than just believing you won't fail at all. If you can't make your own decisions, you'll lack the experiences meant to help you develop self-trust, and having little self-trust makes it difficult for you to gain a sense of responsibility. Decisions, responsibility, and self-trust are like cogwheels. When each part is smoothly engaged, we can live an independent life. And that way of life is manifested in self-trust. Even if Zhuge Liang lives next door, don't entrust your decisions to him. You should just go ahead according to your inner compass, the database of your past and the notes of your failures. There is no perfect answer in life, and whatever your decisions are, all of them are just and right as long as you are responsible for them. Have personal taste. My ex-boyfriend enjoyed regularly watching performances in art centers. They were usually modern dance or performance art invites from abroad, and he wanted me to join him. But even after joining him several times, I didn't find anything interesting except for flamenco. I couldn't understand what they meant even if I read the pamphlets, and no matter how expensive those performances were, I preferred reading books at home as my cultural pastime. I told him it wasn't my cup of tea, so he can go with someone else. I'm not saying this to denigrate the value of art performance. Some people admire modern dance, others admire one-piece action figures, and others still have a marvelous time watching Game of Thrones. Some may judge personal taste or make the mistake of demanding others to have the same taste, but differences in personal taste isn't an evidence of superiority and inferiority, or a domain you can force onto someone. If you want to flourish in your life, you should find your personal taste. And you should be honest with your senses. You shouldn't be influenced by other people's judgment or viewpoint, or chase what's hot in essence. You need to make an effort in developing your insights. However, taste isn't something to develop, it's something to be felt. I prefer exhibits to performances, jolly entertaining movies to sad movies, and grilled pork with spicy naengmyeon to steak with wine. What we all need is our own taste rather than impressive preferences that you may need to fill up your self-introduction form with. The wonder and romance of life is found in taste. Guys, please respect someone else's taste. Face the truth. Disliking someone is quite tiring. This was my problem with some unlikable friends I had in high school. Once I argued with a friend who was in the same student organization as me. She wanted to be the president of the organization because it was counted as part of our grade. She told the teacher she wanted to lead the organization but lied to me that it was the teacher who asked her to take the role. I felt like she was being selfish. After a few incidents, I distanced myself and I didn't hide my feelings from her. When I got older, I came to wonder why I showed her that I hated her during that time. I could have just simply stayed away from her if we didn't get along. On one hand, I felt like I was immature, but on the other, I also thought she was the sort of person to dislike, and hating someone can be a human mistake. One day, I reminisced about my past and wondered why I thought my mistakes could be considered as human mistakes while that friend's mistake was beyond what humans can commit. Anyone can be selfish, and at that time, she was probably just as immature as me. All this time, I only saw the pleasant sides of myself as me. I cursed that selfish friend and acted as if I didn't have a selfish side. When I saw the unpleasant sides of myself, I pretended I didn't see them. I disguised those sides that weren't me. How arrogant I was about myself. Carl Gustav Jung, father of analytical psychology, claimed that everyone has a shadow, which they perceive as personal inferiority that they would like to hide. According to Jung, the shadow can't be completely eliminated, therefore the best way to develop a healthy inner self is to make up with the shadow. We don't feel just one sort of emotion toward a certain incident, and everyone goes through feelings of being pathetic, selfish, and undeniable in the darkest times in life. If you don't accept your inner shadow, your ego gets all confused and you won't be able to perceive or control your true self. To develop a healthier inner self, we have to realize and accept our deficiencies. So let us accept even the unpleasant parts of ourselves. When you face who you truly are, you can accept your hidden desires and be tolerant towards both yourself and others. Stop turning away from yourself and making excuses. The moment you finally face your true self, which is the unity of the self you love and the self you hate, you'll be able to live as a true human being who is not arrogant. It's not that we don't like someone who isn't perfect. We are disgusted by the arrogance when they pretend to be perfect. Stay where you can shine. When I was a middle school student, I went to a public office with my friend for volunteer work. We listed down documents and proofread some numbers to check if there were any errors. I've never been good with numbers, so I got tired easily. I was just managing my work because I was bored, but my friend completely finished hers and said that it was fun. I wondered why, and she said it was fulfilling to check errors and correct them. Afterwards, she studied taxation and now works in a tax department. I'm certain she must be recognized as a hard-working and meticulous employee. For individuals to live a life with self-respect, it's important to understand your talents and choose a job where you can apply them. Otherwise, boredom, and worthlessness are the burdens you'll have to carry by yourself. When people are asked about their talent, they usually think only of artistic or extraordinary jobs and regard only great talents as valuable. If you are stuck with that idea, you can't pay attention to your own talents and strengths. You can develop your talents further, while different talents will make you do different types of work. For instance, not all writers need to try and win the annual literary contest, but what matters is knowing what talents you have rather than how talented you are. So what is a talent? In my opinion, it means something you can do easier than others. And it's not limited to just a few. For some people, talent means sorting out documents well, carrying on a conversation well with any stranger, learning fast, and listening to other people's stories. These talents are not easily evident, unlike painting or singing. So, you have to pay full attention to find your talent and find out what kind of work suits you best. Write down what you like and what you can do better than others. If you have no idea, check out online multiple intelligence scales. You should get to know yourself through various ways. Find an intersection between what you want and what you're talented in. It won't be easy and it may take time. But if you don't pay attention and exert effort in your own life, you won't be able to earn respect from others, and needless to say, from yourself. The biggest tragedy of capitalism is that it regards talents that can't be converted into money worthless. Part 3. Not to be caught by anxiety. Bear life's uncertainties. I like consulting fortune tellers. But up to what part should I believe? The program PD Youngdon Lee on Duty answered my question. In one of its episodes entitled Investigating the Top 10 Korean Fortune Tellers, the producers went to different parts of the country to meet and personally investigate popular fortune tellers. The method of investigation included asking these fortune tellers the fate of a serial killer and a child who was kidnapped and murdered. Even though there were some fortune tellers who did an amazingly excellent job, most of them told completely unrelated stories. Thus, there were only 6 who passed the first test among these fortune tellers. In the second round, only 2 passed the test, and even the one who won the final round said that his divination sign was not 100% certain. 10 million won was spent in this production, which meant the producers must have met at least 100 fortune tellers, but only a few proved themselves to be reliable. In the end, fortune telling is a guess containing a bit of truth, like a ginseng candy with only 5% of ginseng powder. But even so, we see fortune tellers because we want to get assurance in life. Even if Nostradamus rises from the dead and opens his casket, we can't guarantee what the future holds. It's not because fortune tellers lack skills or that the service fee we pay isn't enough, but because the essence of life is uncertainty. I'm sorry to those who need assurance in life, but after 10 years of spending a lot of money for tarot, fortune telling, and divination, I conclude that life, after all, means coping with the uncertainties. In the end, the reason we go to fortune tellers is because we want to hear that everything will be all right. Everything will be fine. Believe not in fortune tellers, but in your own strength. Learn to live with the problems. Once in a while, we confront problems that we don't want. And some of these problems don't seem to have solutions. Things that we can't bring back, mistakes of the past that haunt the present, or things that we have to take care of for a long time so they won't cause a problem. When these things make their way to us, we just want to abandon our damaged life. How nice it would be if life is like a Nintendo game, where we can reset and start all over again. Should I just live hopelessly because my life seems like a failure? I also experienced such a moment. But even when I think of those negativities, in the end, I resolved everything with the words, but I still want to continue living. I felt it was so unfair to give up my whole life just because of a few incidents, and even if others may think that my life isn't important, it is everything to me. Like what Hae-young said in the drama Another Miss O, I've always loved myself and I wished I would always be well. You can also do that, because you're so worn out and fed up with yourself, and because life is already too hard for you to handle, you may also feel that you want to abandon yourself. But there's no one else who'll take care of your life but yourself. Because I was hurt, or because I felt my heart isn't full, isn't it that I would feel so sorry for myself if I was crying alone without someone comforting me? Even if we are sad and suffering in the face of misfortunes, let's learn to live with those uncomfortable truths. I wish for you to live well, not because our weariness means nothing, or because everybody else lives that way, but because your life is the most precious thing to you. I sincerely wish you to live well. Trying to achieve perfect security while worrying about things we can't control is like hoping to live like you're frozen in a sterilized space. Stability in life isn't achieved by removing the uncertainties in life but by facing them. We carry out our lives, but at times, it just needs to be lived. Don't think that problems are yours alone. Since we were children, we thought that a normal family is one where the parents lead a happily married life and their children are provided with unconditional love. But how many parents are actually that perfect? Looking at the image of families depicted by the media and of other people leads us to mistakenly think that a normal family is one without flaw. The result of that thought is that others just don't know that an ordinary individual actually thinks of himself as inadequate and hides in the innermost part of his being a feeling of inferiority. But how can we ever describe something so abnormal? Are there only a few who are abnormal? If being normal is not having a single flaw, does a life that lacks nothing actually exist? Like how Freud described the standard of being normal as having a bit of hysteria, a bit of paranoia, and a bit of obsession, being normal is not absolute perfection but would mean having some wounds, some flaws, and something lacking. There are different ways that people live, and we are part of the minority who live in our own different way. Whatever family background you actually have, or whatever flaw or problems you've actually encountered, whatever that is, everything is normal. We just don't know the problems of others because they hide them well. In this world, there's no misfortune that isn't universal. When faced with something you never wanted, some would think of this as misfortune, while there are also those who consider this as merely an incident. Happiness is decided at this point. Don't write a rubbish scenario about the future. For some time, I repeatedly worried about something unimportant. I did that because if I had already worried about something even before it happened, it would give me a sense of relief when a problem like it did arise. For example, worrying that I have tuberculosis when I find myself coughing continuously, and feeling lucky when I go to the hospital and finding out it was just the flu. I worried too much just so I could feel relieved. But our feelings amazingly continue to repeat themselves, and eventually, when we simply cough, we find ourselves terrified as if we already had tuberculosis. That is how our excessive and distorted worries become habits, and we get worn out rehearsing the worst-case scenario. But worrying about something that didn't happen is like living in an underground tunnel fearing that a war might break out, or buying items in large quantities, which we won't immediately use. It's a waste of life and an unreasonable act. If so, what shall we do to lessen this wasteful act? Worrying originates from unreasonable and excessive negative thoughts. That is why the way to free ourselves from this exaggerated worrying starts with correcting our erratic soap opera-like distorted scenario. Let's try to look into our worries. Aren't these the worst situations, which are less probable to happen? Aren't we worrying that we might have tuberculosis just based on a cough? Let's not ruin the present by being caught in a fabricated future. You suffer because of that rubbish scenario you yourself wrote. Are we not losing life today because we are caught in our thoughts about the future? There is magical thinking primitive in humans. For example, in the primitive ages when there was no weather forecast, continuous rains or typhoons were sudden and fearful incidents. The people then thought that it was because of God's anger that the rains didn't stop, and so they offered a maiden as a sacrifice. Actually, rain will stop when it's time to stop, and their sacrifice can never affect the clouds. But they were at ease with trusting that they were able to control the situation. In order for them to calm the anxiety and fear brought by an uncontrollable situation, they used magical thinking. When I was still an innocent child, after learning about anti-communism at school, for a whole year before I fell asleep, I prayed that the war wouldn't break out. I believed that if I prayed, war won't break out, even if my prayer had no influence on the international state of affairs. Even if we are not primitive men or 10-year-old children, we still rely on magical thinking. Like offering a maiden as sacrifice to stop flooding, or praying every night to wish no war, when we are faced with something we cannot manage, we believe in an easier solution and feel at ease. That is why people even perform rituals such as exorcism just to overcome the pressure of paying for their loan. They even believe excuses of their boyfriends who would habitually abuse them during dates. These people also pretend not to know when problems are already part of their reality. They devote themselves to exerting efforts blindly on things that aren't even related to their happiness. As we use fake solutions as escapes, we fail to reach the solution we need, and nothing essentially gets resolved. Even if we want to believe that time will heal everything, there are problems that can't be solved by time, like we can't rely on fairies for doing our delayed assignments for us while we sleep. If you're at a point in your life that you can't break free from, you have to look back and check whether you've been clinging to a fake solution and find out if you've failed to face the true nature of your problem. In the end, you have to face the true nature of the problem you feared and replace your worries with plans. Expect that it could be an unmanageable and difficult time for you. But when we take the first step towards finding the real solution, that's when we can be truly free. Liberation is getting back the light of consciousness from within you. Liberation for you, who's been detained for too long. What we need when looking back isn't regret, but assessment. What we need when looking ahead isn't worry, but judgment. Don't be too sensitive. One of my friends suffered a vehicular accident. She was crossing the pedestrian lane when a car, which wasn't moving, suddenly accelerated and hit her. It was the mistake of a novice driver and, fortunately, she wasn't hurt badly. But ever since I heard that story, I would get anxious whenever I crossed the pedestrian crossing even if none of the cars are moving. Anxiety is a vague premonition that a negative and scary experience from the past may possibly repeat itself. Even if we think that we will become brave adults after having gone through all sorts of hardships in life, our anxiety will have only grown as we age because of accumulating negative experiences. Those negative experiences can also indirectly influence us, like how the anxiety grew from my friend's accident. We live in a world that's full of things to be anxious about. Media vividly portrays all types of incidents and accidents. If you watch a health information program, there are so many things to prevent and be careful about, and the unstable economy can't guarantee us anything in life. People are tense, the crazy ones are everywhere, the humidifier sterilizer murders people instead of sterilizes. We've seen and heard too much, which naturally makes us too sensitive and anxious. So our minds become overly sensitive due to ceaseless anxiety. An overly sensitive mind tears down the boundary between what really happened and what we think might happen and makes us restless as if something urgent occurred, even when it's nothing to worry about. Like the title of Dr. Suhyun Lee's book, Let's Live Insensitively, we need to be a little more insensitive. This is what we have to tell our overly sensitive self. What happened in the past is merely a separate incident. There's no basis that it will result in a negative consequence, and we can't live being anxious about every little improbable thing. Relax and return not to the world inside your mind but to your real world. The life you actually lived is more peaceful than what you imagined. Even seasoning that makes something tasty can ruin a dish if there's too much. Be fully sad. We depart from lots of things in our life, our loved ones, our childhood when we weren't loved enough, ideals we had when we were young, our youth, the truth we once trusted. All these departures, whether short or long, need to be mourned. Mourning is feeling completely sad without emotional resistance. But we aren't brave enough to face suffering, so we are forced to ignore or control our emotions. It may also be that we don't understand our own emotions, so we end up not allowing ourselves to feel sad. Freud said people get depressed when they don't feel enough grief. Feelings don't disappear just because we block them from being expressed. If repressed, the feeling of loss, which couldn't go through the process of mourning, doesn't disappear but instead develops into depression that prevents us from moving forward. If we feel anxiety and depression but can't find a reason, we should know the truth. Even if it's completely hidden, we have to ask, look for a clue, investigate, and come closer to the truth. Even if knowing the truth is simply the end of the investigation and not of the case, rationalizing the truth alone frees us from being emotionally overwhelmed and also allows us to be fully sad. So, I ask your profound abyss, what are you separated from? My condolences go to everything that couldn't be helped. In order to face the truth of the problem, what we need isn't the quantity of thoughts but its depth. If you feel tired, say it. I don't really say I feel tired. I don't usually say it to others, and I don't think I feel that way either. I always say, okay, because I guess it'll make me more tired if I don't. But if we continue to repress our true emotions even when we are tired, we become insensible to ourselves. That emotion dulls other emotions as well, and you end up abandoning yourself, feeling exploited and reaching your limit. Therefore, even if no one cares and the situation doesn't change, we have to complain if we feel tired, and stop for a while if things are unbearable. You can't always control yourself and think that everything's okay and stay strong. So if there are so many things like installing an ActiveX program in Windows, feeling like you're drowning in responsibilities, or feeling like bursting out into tears as soon as you arrive home, say, "I'm tired." No one will take care of you, and over-sacrifice is self-abuse. It is okay to be selfish and somehow irresponsible. There's nothing more irresponsible than abandoning yourself until you are suffocated with responsibilities. In that regard, I was so fucking tired. Perhaps we were made to think that showing our emotions is bad. Don't blindly work hard just because you're anxious. Come to think of it, I've been doing my best in many things after I finished college. I won contests, paid fees to participate in weird leadership programs, and looked for some groups to support. I realized that I really worked hard on things that aren't related to my work now. Of course, no experience is worthless, like Steve Jobs eventually applying his knowledge in typography to Apple designs. But time isn't unlimited, and our experiences are worthwhile only when we develop our specialization. We live in a world where we fear we are falling behind if we stay put. Thus, we do something because we think we have to work hard on something, and that's where we get a sense of relief. However, half-baked useless Chinese-speaking skills, good-for-nothing certificates, and insignificant participation in activities don't guarantee anything in life, and that feeling of relief easily disappears. People who will exploit our anxiety to earn profit are everywhere, and we can be easily lured. Therefore, stop doing your best anxiously only to prove yourself or to conform with the crowd. Instead, let us go back to square one. What will you do with your life? Set that goal and look for ways to achieve it. The feeling of relief comes with being fully aware of your goals and fulfilling them. The best that we can do is to do our best at this very moment. Part 4. Be a broad-minded individualist. The book entitled The Courage to be Disliked became a bestseller both in Korea and Japan. Not only was it a bestseller, but it was also a sensation in the publishing world that was going through a recession. Why did this book become a bestseller in Korea and Japan? When it comes to studying happiness, it's important to look at these two countries as they have low happiness ratings despite their developed economies. Individualism is an important cultural factor in achieving happiness. Thus, the stronger it is, the happier the citizens are regardless of their income. On the other hand, if it isn't fully developed, the rate of people's happiness doesn't increase despite a developed economy. This is the case for Korea and Japan, which are extreme collectivist societies. If so, what is it about collectivism that hinders people's happiness? In a collectivist culture, a group's goal and harmony are prioritized more than individual freedom, and people are controlled in order for the group to survive. These things are already exhausting, but the bigger problem is the method of how people are controlled. In individualistic societies, society controls people using guilt, and collectivist societies usually control an individual using humiliation. If guilt is feeling ashamed about oneself, humiliation is feeling ashamed about oneself based on how others see them. This is why we control each other and are expected to constantly be conscious of others. In the phrase, walk in someone else's shoes, we check our actions using other people's perspectives, and in the end, we hear ourselves saying useless things like, "I'm gonna show you that I live well," and "I want to live without feeling ashamed." Since this excessive consciousness of how others think is like installing a CCTV in our minds, we get nervous and anxious thinking that others are watching us. Thus, the huge hit of the book The Courage to be Disliked in both Korea and Japan is circumstantial evidence that we are very much afraid of others' judgment and also shows how tired we are of living in a collectivist society. The dominant theory as to why Korea became a collectivist society is its agrarian society, which requires communal labor. However, we no longer gather to plant rice as a living. More than the courage to be hated, what we need now is broad-minded individualism. It's not because Western ideals are always good, but because our collectivist society only caused more losses than gains. Moreover, studies say that individualism, unlike the common assumption that it is related to antisocial behavior, is actually connected to social cooperation. People can form better relationships because they respect one another as they really are. We need to change two things. First, we shouldn't be too nosy or interfere in others' lives. This is a matter of developing a sensibility. Second, we shouldn't be too sensitive about people's reactions. Let us learn to live while acknowledging the ways different people live and the values we each all have. I'm not perfect either, but I'm trying to be. In order for you and I to be a little happier, let us be more understanding of ourselves and others. I'm saying this because I'm worried about you. Let me worry about myself. What we need is not concern but respect. Don't contend for victory. I had a conversation with a female batchmate during our university orientation. She graduated from an art high school in Seoul, and there were several others in our department from the same school. In amazement, I remarked, "It's great A and B are from the same school and you got here together." "No, we weren't that close." "Why?" "They were my competition." I thought I was watching a teen drama. Even if I still think that friends somehow overreacted, I wasn't aware then that the concept of competitive relationships had been deeply engraved into our lives. When I was a student, I read something entitled The Secret to Getting a Higher Grade. The said secret was to choose a rival and study while thinking of that person. Thus, I also thought of a certain friend as a rival, but the method didn't last long. It was only temporary because I couldn't find the meaning in defeating this one person when there are many other people in our country who are smarter than me. Although it was a relief I didn't take that advice seriously, I wonder how many young ones have created a rival after reading that book. When we should have learned the foundation of friendship and trust in the world, we were instead encouraged to create rivals in order to get into prestigious universities and get high marks. It made us look at others not as people we can trust but as competitors. While we obliterate our sense of community, we also ruin our trust in the world and others. That's why even if Korea is a collectivist society, we are last in the list of Sense of Community Index and social relationships among OECD countries. Our society's sense of community is a lot poorer than Western societies, which have been dominated by individualism. It means that even if we still act concerned about how others see us in this strong collectivist society, there's no trust and bond in that relationship. All that's left are pieces of individuals feeling lonely while being suffocated by their relationships. And that reality is frustrating. So what did we actually gain from doing this? Did the competitive relationship lead us to have a powerful competitive edge? I don't think so. For instance, it's not that the author Han Kang wrote The Vegetarian and received a Man Booker International Prize because she was thinking of Julian Barnes or Haruki Murakami as her rivals. In our relationships, if ever we fail to bear a single piece of loss, start to envy our cousin just when he starts to look for a property, tirelessly compete to win, then it might be that we're already used to having competitive relationships. Competitiveness only makes us utterly tired and nervous, but it doesn't lead us to have a competitive edge over others. We have to build our own work and our own world instead of thinking that other people are our rivals. Let's also take one step further and recover our trust in others as well as build a community which won't create rivals out of people. When you resolve to create your world inside that safe space, your strength and potential will become clearer. No one has ever taken your happiness from you. Guilty for the first punch. Innocent for self-defense. Don't feel ashamed for things that aren't shameful. My mother got a serious fever when she was small and suffered from the aftereffects of facial nerve palsy. But I never felt that there was something strange with her face. When I went for a picnic in 3rd grade in elementary school, one of my classmates said my mother looked strange. As a child, I was really shy. I would hide even if it was just to change into my swimwear when we went swimming from our kindergarten. But I didn't feel a bit of shame even when my friend commented about my mother. She just suffered from aftereffects, so why should I feel humiliated? A friend of my friend went to a postnatal care center. One of the ladies there asked everyone about the job of their husband, whether they lived in an apartment or a detached house, or whether it was owned or rented, and then exchanged contact details with only a few. They were as immature as grade school students, being rude and selecting people according to their criteria. When that friend stayed in the care center, She somehow distanced herself from the other ladies. The vicious cycle goes on. They are the ugly, disgusting ones, but it's the ordinary people who feel intimidated and hide to a place where they can't be seen. But what should we be ashamed about? Who should really feel ashamed? I don't have to feel ashamed if those loudmouths are not ashamed of their narrow-mindedness, rudeness, and snobbery. We can't tell them, shut up, but let's not be ashamed for no reason. Those who look down on others are the most ridiculous ones. In the TU program Knowing Brothers, one female celebrity pointed to Jesse's breasts and asked, "Are those fake?" Jesse replied, "Whether these are fake or not, mind your own business." That's true. Mind your own business. Don't try too hard to get along with everyone. One day, a neighbor granny visited a friend of mine. She asked if she could drop by sometimes, and my friend, who rarely turns down a request, told the granny that it was fine. Afterwards, the granny's granddaughter, who preached about cult religion, visited. Then this same girl visited again with her friends without prior notice. There are always people who put a kind person in an awkward situation. So, we sometimes have to stop being too kind. Even if others will feel uncomfortable, we sometimes have to voice our needs, refuse if we want to, and act firmly. It's not easy though, so I'm sometimes disturbed. Should I continue being a good person toward others? Can I tolerate my discomfort? If we stay a good person and have to bear huge discomfort and loss, we better be a strict one. Being a calculating person and protecting self-rights are two different things. Besides, if another person is good enough for me to treat well, they will understand both my request and refusal. If a person gets easily offended by my request or refusal, I don't need to try and keep the relationship either. Although we should not covet others' share, we must protect our own. Therefore, we can't get along with everyone. Sorry to say this, but our priority is always ourselves. Someone who cares for us won't ask a difficult favor in the first place. Distinguish a simple scratch from complete damage. When our new mobile phones are scratched, our hearts sink. These slight scratches caused by mistakes don't pose a problem with our phone's functions. We can't avoid these daily life scratches no matter how hard we try. Thus, we might as well think they're inevitable rather than feel anxious and depressed. If we consider these scratches as complete damage and buy a new one, our bank account will soon hit zero. This simple, daily life scratch applies to all forms of relationships. No matter how perfect a relationship is, it's hard not to have troubles and disappointments. Of course, if the relationship is greatly damaged, it's better to just look for a new one. But if you let it go because of mere problems that could naturally arise, in the end, you'll be left with no one. Overreacting in a relationship will lead you to being alone. It's your own loss. Therefore, if the relationship is damaged, you should think carefully. Think about whether it's a complete damage that will no longer allow friendship or love to function, or simply a daily life scratch that requires understanding considering the depth of your relationship. While we expect a best friend, don't forget the value of a good friend. Do your best in your current relationship. From my teenage years to my 20s, and again from my 20s to my 30s, my friend list has been amended several times. There are some friends who I'm constantly close with, some who are no longer close and have even lost contact with, and new friends whom I get to share a lot of things with. As I ponder upon my previous relationships and think about the premature ending of a supposedly lasting relationship, I feel self-blame and I'm anxious about not being able to maintain them. Why wasn't I mature enough in the past? How much have I changed now? But come to think of it, other people have limitations too, and so do I. Since we can't live just accumulating all the relationships we started, fragile relationships end up worn out. It's not because you did something wrong. The end of a friendship happens to everyone. So don't blame yourself or be afraid of being left alone when the relationship is over. Instead, let us be good company to the ones who stay by our side. Let us meet new friends who bear a likeness to us. You need others the way others need you. That's how we imperfect people live. We depend on each other. Meeting someone shady just because you are lonely will only add devastation to loneliness. Go straight on the green light. When we fancy someone, we want to figure out how that person feels about us and confirm whether a green light is present. But a simple act of not contacting someone may entail various reasons such as sprained fingers out of sight, out of mind, busy due to urgent matters, waiting for the other person to call first. We can't generalize because it's always case by case. That's why even a relationship master or tarot card reader can never truly read someone's mind. You still want to know if there's already a go signal? The correct question is not what do they think of me, but what do I think of them? If you reach the conclusion, I like them, that's the real green light. This means you should go for the relationship. If you just assume a safe distance and test the waters to confirm whether the relationship will work, you should know that cowards are undeserving of love. Nevertheless, be with someone. For some time, books on solitude were bestsellers. Why do people want to read those books? The book Origin of Happiness by Dr. Eungeuk Seo says that a person's DNA is the guideline for survival. I found the book impressive because our DNA contains the survival manual of our ancestors. If our behavior isn't good for survival, our stress system will operate to restrain that behavior, and if our behavior is beneficial to survival, dopamine will be secreted to boost that behavior. Therefore, being stressed when we can't eat and the happiness we feel when we eat delicious food is our DNA's strategy for survival. So, what was most important for the survival of our ancestors? The most important factors were food and relationships. Let's go back to the days when the Archaeopteryx was alive. For our ancestors, breaking away from the group meant death. Therefore, if your relationships were damaged, the pressure and stress were basically warning signals for non-survival. To people of modern society who aren't anxious about food security, relationships remain the main source of stress. To those who are emotionally drained because of relationship issues, books that advocate the value and happiness of being alone are indeed attractive. The message of these books is correct. Whether or not someone hates us, as long as the world does not change into a Walking Dead scenario, we have our debit card when we are hungry, police officers to come and rescue us in times of emergency, and insurance companies when the what-ifs happen. A new world has begun. So we can get by even if we feel lonely. It's sort of our DNA's overreaction, but we won't actually die by being somewhat hated. The only problem amidst this good news is that our DNA didn't evolve to fit the modern world. Since relationships are indispensable for human survival, we get so stressed from having a damaged relationship the same way we feel happiest when we enter a new one. This sounds anachronistic, but we are happiest when we are with someone. It's not literature, it's part of evolutionary psychology's history. This isn't emotion, it's instinct. So, don't head down a rocky road thinking you can find happiness by yourself. Look for someone whom you click with. Just like you don't have to abstain from eating after consuming spoiled food, you don't have to cut off all your relationships because of a single lousy person. What matters is the sense of smell you use to distinguish spoiled food, and having the insight not to stay with insincere people. No matter what you have to face, you have to look for a friend who will understand and respect you. The trust that your shortcomings will not be laughed at, trusting someone and being worthy of that someone's trust, this is the best tranquilizer and the true actualization of the abstract concept of happiness. It is not an excuse, but an apology, not a tarot card, but courage for a one-sided love, and not the strength to endure but someone sincere for a lonely person. My friend, when I was immature and so many unexpected events rushed into my life, when things were hard to explain or I didn't bother to explain, I appreciated your considerate calmness more than your fussy comforting. Part 5 for a Better Life to-do list. The price of apathy towards public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. Plato. Crack corny jokes sometimes. One TV show once talked about people born with and without a silver spoon. It was the talk of the town during that time, so everyone was discussing it everywhere. One of the hosts in the said show said that we don't choose a restaurant based on its fancy cutlery, because what's important is not the cutlery but the food we eat. It means you go for something rather than hesitating because of your background. It was an awesome metaphor and quite comforting, and I felt like it was from his good heart. The talk about a silver spoon is not really about spoons. It's about hereditary capitalism. When there were more opportunities due to the new expansion of industrial foundation, social mobility was relatively easy. But now active social mobility is disappearing. The discriminating opportunities because of parents' wealth or social status will lead to the gap in income and occupations, and class becomes permanent as wealth is inherited. Since being born with or without a silver spoon in your mouth is an issue of fixed social class, we should question how to alleviate this hereditary wealth and discriminating opportunities, then come up with solutions. It's not because we are whining but because we want to pursue what's best. I have published several books and sent out my personal assurances and encouragement to my readers. But did we perhaps just barely touch the problem's surface and blur our way in the social discourse? In the midst of a collective regression where people whine and ask for consolation when they trip over a stone, everyone just stands by and watches without picking it up. We may find it easy to react with witty words or sarcasm. I also prefer the less serious. But sometimes we need difficult, complicated, and boring discourse. Don't criticize yourself. In one variety show where a teenager in the audience was interviewed, he told his mom, "Mom, I will buy you a Mercedes-Benz in the future." The mother looked pleased at her son. He is praiseworthy. Perhaps I'm a weirdo, but I somehow felt bitter. I'm sorry to say this, but it's unlikely he would be able to buy a Benz for his mom. It's not that he lacks something, but it's just what usually happens, except for only a few extraordinary cases. Like the saying, as soon as the umbilical cord is cut, connection to money is formed. Parents spend so much money for children as soon as they are born. This includes expensive educational fees for their children to win competitions. They have to pay the enormous college tuition and also have to shoulder the monthly housing rental and allowance amounting to hundreds of thousands won if their children live away from home. It depends on the circumstances, but children are hugely indebted to their parents until they start working in society. That's why these children tell their parents they will buy a Benz for them. They were the cause of their parents' backbreaking labor, so they believe that by at least buying a Benz, they could pay back their debt. The thing is, it's not easy to pay one's debt. It's hard to get a job. Entry to society is often delayed. Only 5% of graduates will be employed in a stable conglomerate or government agencies. Most of them scrape out a living even after getting a job. With their amount of salary, they get married, and for those who want to buy a house, they have to apply for a bank loan and, again, borrow money from their parents. Eventually, when we have our own children, we have to spend on high tuition fees and child-rearing expenses just like our parents did. Thus, in this lifetime, there will never come a day when we can buy them a Benz. We did nothing wrong in the process. Based on the fact that we exist and that we live an ordinary life, how many financial and emotional debts should we actually shoulder? The real problem is high child-rearing fees, educational expenses, tuition fees, living allowance, and the lack of good quality employment to support these expenses. The problem does not solely lie with us. Society drowns us in debt even before we enter it, and that same society never shows us any solution to pay our debt. Individuals blame their deficiencies and suffer from guilt and indebtedness. If you also suffer from these, you should at least know why you fell into debt. Even if that reality doesn't make your debt forgiven, you should at least not blame yourself. We didn't live a wrong life. Workload for 3 people is done by 2 people. Everybody, let us be unhappy. Don't look away from what you deserve. Nothing is fun these days. I used to be interested in so many things. What's wrong with me? What proper advice can we give a friend who's distressed? 1. Develop a hobby. 2. Join a club. 3. Go on a trip. 4. Seek psychiatric help. These are all possible, but I thought about my friend's situation. Her life during that time was filled with overtime and weekend shifts. On top of that, she was suddenly reclassified from being a regular employee to a temporary one because of her company's management problem. Her future wasn't clear. Therefore, the reason she had no interest in anything was due to long hours of labor and anxiety about her unstable employment. She was physically and emotionally exhausted, so how could she enjoy a pleasant, productive pastime? Any comforting words seemed inappropriate. Without enhancement of the working environment and stability in life, a happy existence can't be encouraged. So what else do we need if not comfort? Most people used to go to work even on Saturdays before the 5-day workweek was implemented in 2004. The reason why we now have Friday night fever is not because of our fierce struggle nor strong will, but the change in social system. An individual's will and effort are indeed important, but they cannot fix everything. Still, we continue to take care of our own lives. In order to live a successful life, we reduce our sleeping time from 7 to 6 hours, and improve our resume from having 3 certificates to 5. As we battle further, we sleep even less, going from 6 to 5 hours, and add more certificates. If individuals aren't responsible for their own unhappiness, self-exploitation can't help them solve it. In order to solve our individual problems, we have to face them as social problems and do our best to make this society better. I don't think the solution for everyone is to put up a barricade and throw petrol bombs in rallies. I'm also not talking about dichotomy that will downplay an individual's effort. Here's what we can do. We can't solve the failure of the local economy, but we can shop at the wet market or at local stores rather than at big grocery chains. We can't solve the labor problem, but we can support those who rally. We can't balance biased media, but we can sponsor alternative media. Corrupt politics won't change overnight, but we can still vote for the sincere politicians. We can't transform the snobby world and turn it upside down, but we can still care for each other. These are the many things we can do in our everyday life. Just like how ocean water doesn't go bad because of 3% salt, if some things are not working well in the world, perhaps we each lack 3% effort. So, let us do what we can do. The sole savior of our society is an individual who does not ignore it. We learn and grow through trial and error. So, let us not despair. Our last stand is mature citizenship. New trickle-down effect. Someone poops from the top, so our drinking water is contaminated. Endure if you have to. A friend whom I met at my first workplace is hardworking, diligent, and kind. But she can't take it when she is treated like a commodity by her superior or president. Most people would endure it, but she would sooner hand in a resignation letter. She's an asset though, so her company keeps her. One time, her president condescended and gave her a $200 bonus. But then he didn't like her attitude, so he said, "Do you want me to take your bonus back?" I myself could say he was an awful bastard. How dare he take her for a pushover? But I told her not to resign even then. What kind of person am I to say that to her? During my time as a company employee, my superior once threatened me by doubling the actual number of applicants for my post and said, "Many applied for the designer post. You better be nervous." It meant someone else could take my post at any time, so I should do well. I said, "I'll quit then, employ a new one." Although it was possible for me to say that because I was much younger then and I was doing so much work that I couldn't be fired, I was just like my friend. Even so, I told her not to show the same attitude next time. She should quit when she thinks she needs to. Even if she is threatened or forced to be servile by her shameful superior, she shouldn't change her path for insignificant human beings. Quitting for those reasons would only increase these people's influence on her life. Are they that great? You don't need to forgive or smile at them. But if you need to, endure it. Working to earn money is not lowering yourself but something natural, and enduring is not humiliating nor pathetic. Just value your own life over those bastards. Don't be anxious. Dr. Myung-woo No, a sociology professor at a Jew university, said it feels like society changes at a tremendous pace, but it actually changes very slowly. It's like when an extremely obese person goes on a 3-month hellish diet to reach the average weight only to go back to being obese if there's no continuous effort. Diet, personal problems, and social problems are not an instant revolution, and change is not permanent. Continuous maintenance is the only way to prevent the yo-yo effect. In a similar way, our life also needs constant time and effort for change, even if you are anxious about going backward or staying in the same position. Everything goes that way. In order to change, what you need the most is the capability to not get tired. How not to have a scar after a burn. 1. Apply lotion. 2. Apply it often. 3. Keep applying it. There's no other way. The best way to cure a wound is to constantly exert effort to heal every day. Learn how to fight well. I get along well with my older sister, but sometimes we argue for petty reasons. We learned how to explain our emotions and make up after living together for 20 years. But my parents hated arguments and sometimes tried to mediate and block our conflicts. I didn't like it. Despite the forced silence and unresolved hard feelings, this outward silence was what my parents' generation considered peace. Our society regarded conflict as fights and demanded obedience and adaptation. So a cornered stone had to rub corners, and it was better to keep one's mouth shut than to open it. As a result, Wabyung exists uniquely in Korean society. In a fake harmony where emotions are suppressed, individuals suffer and relationships rot. But if a society without strike, dispute, debate that pursues uniformed value is ideal, wouldn't North Korea be the ideal perfect society? Just as Freud explained that it leads to mental illness, a harmonious society caused by oppression can never be healthy. The problem isn't in society being divided or public opinion, but in not being able to find a solution or compromise because people failed to argue. Some time ago, a tourist bus accident occurred because of sleep-deprived driving. 4 tragically died and many people criticized the bus driver. Some even said he was evil. Is he really evil? Bus drivers earn more or less 2 million won by driving an average of 16 hours a day with only 3 to 4 hours of sleep. Since food and accommodation are not provided, they sleep in the bus trunks. That driver indeed slept in the bus the day before the accident. But how could we blame only the individual for drowsy driving when he had to endure severe working conditions without enough sleep? In a society that isn't willing to pay for our safety, we should be afraid of not only becoming a victim but also of becoming a criminal. The point is the backwardness of our social system that relies on individual responsibility and morality when it comes to social problems. However, we still blame individuals instead of questioning the system. Rather than looking at the nature of the problem, we just switch the discourse through self-righteous dichotomization of conservative and progressive ideas. We can't move into solving problems that way. If you want this world you live in to change for the better, break free from self-righteous disobedience and unconditional criticism of arguments, and learn how to argue in order to find a solution. What we need is not criticism but alternatives, not insult but persuasion. Our social problem doesn't lie in constant arguing, but in failing how to argue well. Those who strictly care for hierarchy without good manners are called boomers. Find the basis for your hope. It feels embarrassing to talk about hope these days, because what follows the word hope is torture. This is a corny example that will answer the question above. During the Vietnam War, many U.S. Army soldiers were arrested. Many weren't able to endure the prison and died. According to General Stockdale, the first ones who died were optimists. They believed they would be released before Christmas, and then before Easter, and then Thanksgiving Day, and when the next Christmas came, they died with an endless sense of loss. Was it hope that killed them? I disagree, but their optimism without basis was almost an escape from reality. Our society was once full of optimists. Economic prosperity was foreseen and self-development books taught the secret to success, so everyone believed success was at hand. But reality was ice cold. The truth we believed in childhood that told us our effort would lead to success was partially redefined to become, effort sometimes leads to success, and unrealistic anticipation results in a sense of loss. So is it better to become pessimistic and expect nothing? It wouldn't be right either. In the war, pessimists died after optimists. So what should we do? Survivor Stockdale faced reality and did what he could do. He deliberately injured himself in order not to be video recorded as a well-treated POW, and made an internal communication system to lessen isolation among his subordinates. As a result, his mental health improved and he was able to endure and survive 7 and 1-2 years in prison. These days, talking about hope is torture. That's right. Hope that isn't based on reality is like opium. But can we actually endure life without hope? The truth is, we always have to be hopeful based on reality. We can't expect to lose weight if we eat 4 meals a day. If you want to hope, find a way. And if you are sure about the way, endure the exhaustion that comes with it. What you have to do is not to have a vague hope, nor despair without alternative, but to build a basis for hope. Man proposes, God disposes. Knock and the door will be opened. Where there's a will, there's a way. Heaven helps those who help themselves. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Hope is actually conditional. Willingly do a favor for the world. I usually help strangers. I searched and looked for the bus stop and the funeral parlor's phone number for an old couple who was going to a wake, and when I saw a lady being followed by suspicious people, I stopped her and told her to head the other way. The reason why I became this nosy is my backpacking experience. My phone was broken, and even though the language and environment were all unfamiliar, I was able to safely complete my trip. Thanks to all the help I received, whether big or small. I'm not weak in Korea. I am familiar with the streets, live healthily, and speak fluent Korean. When I became weak by myself, I realized that small gestures of help were desperately needed, and there was always someone who gladly helped me. My mom was worried that helping strangers would harm me. But I told her that it's people like me who'll help her when she gets older. When no one helps us in times of need, we shut down our hearts and stop asking for help. I don't want to live in a world where people have resolved not to cause trouble and refuse to help others. What I need in life is caution and discretion, not disbelief. I still believe in the goodwill of the majority. I want to assure others that the world is worth doing a favor for, and I want to live believing that someone will hold my hand when I am in trouble. Be someone who cannot be converted to money. Epicurus said that the 3 things we need to be happy are friendship, thought, and freedom. Freedom means living by your own will. I took the word for granted when I was a child. I become aware as I get older that freedom is partially realized by money. We wake up every morning and earn money in order to pay bills, to attend a friend's wedding, to make a living, and to pay for our freedom. In another sense, we need money so we don't lose our freedom. So we do our best to build our position in society, prove our potential, and demand a reasonable compensation. Money is a means of survival that we can't ignore. No matter how important money is, we should consider it only as a means of living and not as a measure of people's worth. We can't use it to measure people or to determine one's success. We should set our own life standard and philosophy and face our real self, which can't be converted into money or business cards. Before asking, how should I make money? We should first answer the question, what is right? Let's be someone who doesn't need to prove what we possess. Real sexiness comes from the confidence within ourselves. Some people infuriate the public by power tripping. But are these people actually happy? Well, the happy people I know don't behave like psychopaths. Among the addictions, the most common is addiction to money. Don't participate in the Hunger Games. When a Hollywood actor was reported to have an affair with a nanny, netizens assumed that might not be true. It's not that they trusted the actor, but that they couldn't believe he would have an affair with a nanny. We demand equality and get furious about power tripping and discrimination. But in reality, that means we don't want to be ignored, not that we won't ignore others. How judgmental actually are we? Once I was reading the society section of the news and saw the comments under it. They were saying the solution to the high unemployment rate among the younger generation was to remove provincial colleges. I was surprised by this bold statement, but what's more surprising was that this was the top comment, meaning it was approved by many. Suddenly, I remembered the film The Hunger Games. It's a sci-fi film that takes place in a virtual space called Panem. The Hunger Games are games where 2 tributes from each of the 12 districts of Panem kill each other until there's only one final winner. The ruling class, capital, holds these Hunger Games and televises them so that the tributes are frightened. One winner is given wealth and dignity to justify the death of the other 23 tributes. When the game starts, alliances form and eliminate the weak ones first. When they remove the weak tributes, their safety is guaranteed for a while. However, as the game only allows one winner, you will be eliminated by the strong in the same manner that you eliminate the weak. We can say that this film is a metaphor for the winner-take-all competition and neoliberalism. In the film, those who are pushed into the winner-take-all competition feel relief as they eliminate the weaker ones. But no one will be safe until we stop this irrational game where we have to drive others out. Some say the world will get better only through political change. Of course, good politicians, a transparent society, and justice are indispensable. But for these to be realized, there should be reflection on the rule and unity where we don't drive out each other. Our sense of security is achieved not when we drive each other out, but when we protect each other. So let us stop inexplicit discrimination and competition. As long as we don't stop this cruel game, you are up next. Which makes you more humiliated. Be a grown-up that wanders. In the film Dead Poets Society, Neil grew up under his strict father who forced him to be a doctor. One day, Neil played the main character in Shakespeare's play, A Midsummer Night's Dream. He was spending his happiest days demonstrating his talent and skills, but his father threatened to transfer him to another school if he didn't quit. Neil tried to rebel against his father but gave up when he saw his mother. She looked so desperate and pathetic. Neil was full of helplessness and hopelessness. That same night, he ended his life with his father's gun. People despair when they can't stand their life and when they just can't live the way they want. One psychiatrist said that the common thing about Hungary, Japan, and Korea is that these societies do not allow people to wander. These three countries have another thing in common: a high suicide rate. In Korea, wandering around is taboo as it is considered a shortcut to ruining your life. That's why the term wandering teenagers was created. Going to college, getting a job, getting married, having a child, buying a house, and a series of tasks should be completed by the optimal age, deadline, and no second of wandering is allowed. Otherwise, one can't avoid disappointing your parents, gossiping people who see you as a failure, and the fear of social isolation. As a result, Korea has two indexes, the highest suicide rate and the lowest birth rate. These two indexes show that even the most basic human instinct, survival and reproduction, was given up by many. This shows how its people do not consider Korea as a livable country. In a society that monitors whether individuals accomplish the given tasks, individuals become nervous and suffocated even just by being stagnant momentarily. Some would say people are crybabies because life was harder in the past and there are countries that are struggling more than Korea. But what makes Korean people tense and suffer is a social paradox rather than an absolute economic index. The fear that makes people unhappy is not poverty. It is the feeling of misery and isolation for not being accepted in society. That's why people would call Korea Hell-Josian. People are unhappy like they live in hell. Can't we be happy? Many people think that Northern European countries with a high rate of happiness are ideal places to live in. But according to Leo Bormans, their high rate of happiness depends on sufficient freedom, trust in other people, and respect for skills and interests, rather than high incomes or a social welfare system. And we stand on the opposite side now, a place where freedom is deprived, people are forced to live a uniformed life, and people distrust each other. No matter what kind of life we live, if we believe that we'll be respected for who we really are, imagine just how free we could actually be. The social welfare that is as important as our existence, which we need in order to feel happy, is the freedom to wander as much as we want and a gentle mind that's willing to understand. This is not something found in a textbook, but this could be an essential solution. Being tolerant and generous towards each other will let us break free from this unhappiness. From now on, let's stop being miserable. Part 6 for a good and meaningful life to-do list. Happiness comes from the capacity to feel deeply, to enjoy simply, to think freely, to risk life, to be needed. Storm Jameson. Don't think of happiness as your life's goal. In fact, the root of the problem is Aristotle. When he said that the purpose of life is to be happy, people started to believe that our goal in life is the feeling of utopia that is happiness. However, people aren't romantic beings born to just be happy. The 6 primeval feelings of humans are pleasure, anger, hate, fear, sadness, and surprise. There's no way that only one positive feeling exists. The thought itself that life's purpose is to be happy is a big illusion. Affirming happiness as life's purpose and talking as if a perfectly happy life exists makes the unhappy ones feel that they are losers. This is why people exert efforts to hide their depression and think that they must suppress their sadness whatever it takes. But isn't it natural for us to feel depressed and sad? Even if the Palace of Versailles removed all the comfort rooms to keep it completely beautiful, living entails secretly taking a shit at a corner of the palace and sometimes also stepping on someone else's shit. So it's okay for us to be sad and depressed sometimes. How will we know what happiness is if those times don't exist? Of course we have to work hard to be happy, and I bid for your happiness. Even so, no matter how many times you ask me, the purpose of life is not happiness but will always be life itself. Those who are happy 6 to 7 out of 10 times are happy people. But if you want to be completely happy 10 out of 10 times, that could actually be an obsessive-compulsive disorder. Living while proving your happiness to someone is the most pitiful way to live. Take life lightly. My first trip was a month-long backpacking trip, and I filled up my bag since I was very anxious about traveling alone. I prepared 3 books and 2 types of hair straighteners, so there was no question how crazy I was packing my things. I traveled carrying 2 bags, and when it was just a week before the end of my trip, I was already totally exhausted. Every situation was tiresome, and I even got sick of myself for carrying heavy bags while traveling. When I was sitting inside the airport waiting to go to my next destination, I opened my bag, picked only the things I needed, and threw away half of what was in my bag. I was worried that it might get difficult after I threw out half of what I brought, but my trip became a lot easier. One person I met during my trip was traveling for more than one and packed a half year only, and all he had with him was a single backpack. Minimal luggage, and bought other stuff only when he needed it. An example would be buying new clothes in a local market when his clothes were worn out, and he said doing so was life's pleasure itself. We tend to prepare a lot of bags because we're anxious about life, but there isn't actually a need for a lot of necessities. We can allocate based on our needs, and sometimes it may be rather beneficial when we put up with the slight inconvenience. Life is a long journey. We won't get exhausted if we take life lightly. So if you want to live an easy life, face once again the things you couldn't let go in your heart and have the courage to leave them behind. When traveling, the stuff that we haven't used even once, the worries about things that have not happened, the needless desires that make life heavy, and the shame felt by those who did nothing wrong, all these add up to excessive exhausting relations. The ultimatum about all these? Giving them up shall set us free. If you want to live freely, move away from those that you do not need to live. Tolstoy. Please throw away in each trash bin the things you don't need. Take more risks in life. In the movie Old Boy, Oh Dae-soo was locked by Woo Jin in a cell for 15 years eating only fried dumplings. Why did Woo Jin resort to doing such act? He could have forced Dae-soo to do manual labor like sticking eyes and stuffed toys, and at times could have fed him fried dumplings. But someone once said that even if a hamster goes round and round in a treadwheel for a long time, if it lived in a repetitive pattern and in the same environment every day, it would not feel the passage of time. A past that is compressed in just one pattern and one type of environment will simply pass by as one moment. Could the reason why Woo Jin confined Dae-soo in the same environment with the same pattern be because he also wanted to steal even those 15 years from Dae-soo's life? In Pai Cheon-duk's Longevity, he said that, if a person lived like a machine, it's short-lived old. Living with even though he lives up to 80 years the same pattern every day is limiting innumerable life's possibilities and diversity, and losing our own lives. So, let us go to the sea on a weekend, try to walk through a different route after getting off work, meet new people, and try to experience things we haven't tried until now. Let's break free from the idea we have of ourselves and try to become something we ourselves can't anticipate. The way to live long is not by extending the lifeline in our palm up to the wrist, but by facing new sceneries. Everyone runs at full speed, and there are times when I feel like I'm behind. Try not to feel desolate. When I went to Australia to meet my friend, I was able to visit a zoo, admiring its huge scale, which minimized the use of man-made facilities, when suddenly, a group of men, who looked like they came from an Abercrombie and Fitch magazine, passed by. We usually think that zoos are for families with children, but it was interesting to know that looking at animals in nature is also fascinating for the youth. One Australian I had a chance to talk to said that his favorite pastime is bird watching. He said that was why he was looking at the birds. Another Australian in her late teens whom my friend met said that she was very excited to spend Christmas with her family. She boasted about how much food is prepared for dinner in her grandmother's place, as well as the number of relatives who gather to spend a wonderful time with each other. Even if this observation cannot be generalized, it seems that pleasure for Australians lies in their families as well as in nature. To us who have solid family ties, a national holiday is an obligation, and we feel pathetic if we are at home during Christmas. As mentioned in Daniel Tudor's book, Korea, The Impossible Country, we were able to create a miracle but seem to have lost our sensitivity to feel simple happiness and pleasure in return. This is why we don't regard going to zoos, watching birds on trees, and having dinner with our family as a pleasure. In the midst of doing physical labor where emotions should be suppressed and competition makes us inhuman, we become emotionally drained while pleasure is defined both as compensation for bearing the boredom of everyday life and a strong motivation. This is similar to psychotics drained of emotions who are in pursuit of extreme pleasure. Since they can't feel small pleasure, they start to look for sensational pleasures. But when these sensational pleasures are over, life gets more dull and loses its vigor. If you want to fully feel your life, you should be sensitive to the simple happiness of life and find joy in living. We need a redefinition of pleasure, and we have to practice pastimes and games that we can enjoy even without spending money. It's not something pathetic or shabby, but a way to easily become happy anytime. It is not for report submission or winning a competition, but we should demonstrate creativity and imagination for our own life. Be happy on your own. My younger sibling was born from my old parents. He seems to be the last task of my parents. My mother said she will be happy if she sees him establish himself and live well. Although they say all parents think alike, I feel pitiful about this. I hope my mother becomes happy, but my sibling has to be happy first for her to be happy. That means my mother's happiness is out of her control. It is the same as leaving the key to her happiness outside the door and waiting for someone to press the doorbell. The result is that parents feel worried about the sadness of their children, and these children also feel liable for their parents' unhappiness. In the end, none of us can become happy when we worry about the happiness of each other. So where in the world did the problem begin? Even though we usually say we will make our loved ones happy, as long as we are not caregivers of people's emotions, we can't continuously make anyone happy in the same way that no one could ever make us consistently happy too. The happiness of others is actually out of reach, and each of us should be responsible for our own happiness. This is why we shouldn't neglect our own happiness. In the end, the best we can do is, even if we share affection and love with others, to be fully responsible for our own happiness. By all means, let us be happy in our own way. I lived well, tried not to hinder other people's happiness, endured difficulties, and lived honorably. I have a right to be happy. We all have the right to be happy. Think of what you've achieved. One acquaintance of mine secured all types of finance-related licenses and prepared hard during college days to get into a financial company. In the end, he was able to enter and work for a stock firm providing a high annual salary. But after only a year, he suddenly quit his job. He said it was because the work was no fun. If that's the case, was he a person who considers enjoyment important? In the past, did he find working in a financial company fun? What exactly is fun to him? From the beginning, he wasn't able to properly choose the things he considers important. In this world, there is no perfect job in need of me that has all these: fun, rational boss, salary and proper monetary compensation, and a vision for the future. In most of our decisions, we are given limited capital and limited choices. We cannot buy life like Mansoor shopping in E-Mart. This is why when making decisions, what we can give up is more important than what we can get. Between a decreasing salary and a crazy boss, between losing one's work and not being able to spend time with your children, between giving up things we want to try and living without a fixed salary. What is it that would be harder for us to bear? We have to be the ones to determine up to what we can bear. If we think only of the things we lose, we will always live in regret. There's no one who will listen to you whining like a child who can't endure anything. Say goodbye to the past. When I was in second grade of elementary school, our homeroom teacher showed favoritism for some students. During class, she would ask only those students and always praise them. I was just an extra sitting beside the main character. When I think about it now, she must have really favored these students because I completely felt it even as a child. I eventually learned that our teacher was known to receive bribes. She once called my mom to school, and when my mother went without any presents, she was scolded by my teacher. She must have had another reason for favoring those students. But during that time, I didn't know that adults could also make mistakes. I simply thought, I'm not the main character, and that thought stayed with me for a long time. In this world, there are lots of crazy and pathetic people. Those people hurt us when we are young and continue to haunt us like unresolved issues until now. This is why many interpret present issues based on their past. The reason why I didn't have confidence was because of that teacher's discrimination, the reason I got it back was my parents' way of child rearing, and the reason why I feel inferior was because I was bullied by other children. It's correct up to that part. But the reason why we try to understand the issues of the present in connection with the past is not for us to remain in that past and be rewarded a belated compensation, nor for us to pity ourselves and eventually be treated like an unfortunate princess, but for us to cut that link between the two and move forward with our lives. In this world, there are pathetic, clumsy, and immature people, and unfortunately, we might have possibly met them. But the truth we can get by looking at the past is that my teacher was simply pathetic. My parents were just inexperienced adults who weren't born only to become parents, and those children were just immature. And during that time, I was just too young to realize all these truths. However, we are no longer weak young children and we have the right to move forward. If we don't want to be imprisoned in our past, we have to console our past self and bid farewell to everyone who was immature. It's okay now. Leave a blank space for ignorance in life. When we print design works, we set the background a bit bigger than the actual size. We leave the margin because there might be a problem during the cutting part. It's both being lenient when it comes to miscalculation, mistakes, and people's know-how in order to come up with a safe result. So is life. There's no life that is cut right according to one's plan. We exert so much effort on unnecessary things, spend a long time in order to mend a moment's mistake, and spend an unexpected amount no matter how careful we are. Life can never always be as planned or efficient. That's why instead of self-blame and regret, it's better to leave a blank space for mistakes and errors and determine the cost for being stupid. Let's just think that this kind of stupidity is acceptable in life. This useless task could be a necessary process. Life cannot always be efficient, and that we also have a hard time as this is our first time to live. We will feel safer and freer if we are lenient about our errors and mistakes. Let's fill the time we wasted with good health and long life. Even so, you should understand yourself. In the past, I met a career counselor who consults for adults. Among those this person meets are people who are usually referred to as geniuses, but unlike what we would expect, these people's lives are not that easy. They didn't get high grades during their school days because they had a hard time adjusting to rote learning since their minds have a much bigger capacity. This is the same reason why Edison was not able to understand 1 + 1 is equal to 2. These geniuses fail to go to a field where they can exhibit their capacity, and in cases where they work in regular companies, they have a hard time enduring that lifestyle. Thus, many of them take medications for depression or OCD. People around would have told them, not everyone lives doing what they love, or, it's not only you who's having a hard time. And upon hearing those words, they must have felt conscience-stricken or a sense of shame. But the scale of my suffering is not similar to that of other people. In this world, there are people who find it difficult to deal with others, and in the same way that some find it hard to run, it's natural that people feel different levels of difficulty even when facing the same problem. If something is giving me a hard time, it's not because I'm wrong, or that I'm a winner, or that I'm not good enough. It's because I just feel that way. The fact that my feet hurt in a pair of ready-made shoes is not my feet's fault. So let's not give ourselves a hard time. What led them to tragedy was that they themselves couldn't understand why they were having a hard time. Understanding oneself doesn't mean self-pitying or self-defense declaring that you didn't do anything wrong. It means putting an end to abusive self-criticism and unnecessary guilty conscience, and accepting ourselves as we are. In order to do this, we need to understand ourselves, choose a life that suits us, and respect our own choice. Even if we sometimes feel down for not being understood, we must at least understand ourselves. Be concerned about your happiness. Once, I made a misfortune notebook. I used to write down my feelings in moments of depression and despair and read all of them again when I feel better. Then I would realize how illogical my thoughts were whenever I had anticipated an extreme situation to take place. But after suffering a few times, I felt like I'd become an unfortunate person. That's why I changed the purpose of my notebook to a happiness notebook. There, I recorded moments when my depression would go away and moments that I feel happy. Upon doing that, I was able to determine what makes me happy and also realized that even moments of depression would soon come to pass. Although people say that they want to be happy, They don't try to get to know what really gives them happiness. Happiness doesn't just simply show up on your dining table one morning. Instead of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, a skill not to end up entangling our earphones, or computing our year-end income tax deduction, what's more important to know in our life is having our own happiness know-how in determining what makes us happy, what helps us recover, and which moments make us feel alive. If you want to be happy, you have to be concerned about your happiness. Love the imperfection. Lee Sedol versus AlphaGo, analog watch versus digital watch, handwritten letter versus email, record player versus MP3. We yearn for the perfect things and love the imperfect. Ask how to live. For a long time, I wondered whether life is an object of enjoyment or an object for the pursuit of meaning. It was hard to choose the answer. First, I couldn't understand what life's meaning meant. It seemed like a vague phrase I couldn't grasp. I got exhausted thinking about it in a complicated way and just decided to consider life as an object of enjoyment. I'd just do my best in each moment, feel alive, and enjoy living. In reality, it is a pretty good life. I try to retain only the things that I consider most important, and if we look at them in big categories, they are work, relationships, enjoyment, and good mental and physical health. I didn't get anxious beforehand about things that did not happen, and I did the things I want, which I thought I could actually do. Want plus can equals do. It's a very simple formula. But we have to work hard. I felt a sense of accomplishment in completing a rough sketch that I vaguely planned. And I met people that I can trust, those that fit my code. I stayed away from unimportant people and relationships that bring me down. I also promised myself that I won't allow them to treat me thoughtlessly. I made time to enjoy my life and admired the beauty of the skies several times each day. I faced and solved the problems that I once ignored and exerted an effort to be healthier. Upon moving a step away from other people's gaze and judgment as well as from the answers determined by society, my life became clear and easy. But strangely, I continued to wonder whether I was living well. I felt a certain insufficiency by plainly living each moment of my life faithfully. That's why I came back to the start and decided to search for the meaning of life. What is it that gives life meaning? The answer I found after a series of questions was that it's moving from an individual space towards a public one and realizing one's worth in a society. I took the lead and encouraged the participation of individuals for society. It's because I believe that solving our social issues is a direct way to solve individual problems. But that isn't the only reason for us to do our share. Similar to Aristophanes' words, we need others for us to be able to complete ourselves. We can find our own meaning when we feel that we are valuable as part of a society and within our relationships with others. Of course, this does not mean that we put aside our own life and only sacrifice for others. In order for you to realize your value in the community, you should feel your existence in the society while doing what you can do. In my case, I hope the world is a little bit better. I hoped that the world would allow those with good intentions at least a simple livelihood and would not make people feel miserable despite poverty. That is why I started to give donations to the party I supported, and also started donating to 2 more alternative journalisms from this year. I tried my best to no longer insult anyone I encountered, and I also wanted to create a small yet meaningful wave through my publications. The question on how to live did not end. No, it never will. If I would have to share my own answer, I would say, let's live a good life. There's no need to think in a complicated way. Work hard, talk to your loved ones, eat delicious food with them, and bask in the sun on a sunny day with good books and your favorite songs. I think that the warmth of that everyday life is what a good life entirely is. And if possible, let's move a step closer to a meaningful life. Even if we are nothing but small dust in this universe, we can overcome this emptiness and protect our own dignity. Regardless of what the world considers victory and defeat, I want to feel proud of that life. There's a book entitled No Matter How You Live Your Life, I Will Support You. But the one who needs this support the most is myself. Thus, to myself who will stay with me until my final breath, be sure to say this today. No matter how I live my life, I will support myself. Live like a grown-up. When I was young, I thought my mother was strong. But now I realize she was just a woman in her 30s. She must have felt afraid, exhausted, and helpless, Yet she played her part while biting the bullet for someone else. Now that I have grown up, I see that when I was young, simply eating and sleeping well was enough to fulfill my role, but no one would praise me for those things now. If I whine about not receiving an allowance, my parents would call me a jerk. Even if I still long to be protected and resist adulthood, I can't wear green tights and act like Peter Pan. This is why, to make a living, we have to do things we don't like and bear whatever comes: weariness, anxiety, and discomfort. Even if we don't want to be adults, we become adults by pretending to be so, just like our parents did. Epilogue. Now that I am an adult, the world feels cruel. There is an overflow of absurdity, people set needless boundaries, and ordinary individuals enjoy looking down on others whenever they can. To earn a living, everyone has to ignore their feelings and constantly worry about our poor social safety net. I didn't want to be insignificant, and I didn't want to turn into someone indifferent. While searching for how to live, I asked myself, what do we need to be ashamed of? What is this inner sense of inferiority? What can we gain from discrimination and insult? Why do so many of us struggle with misfortune? In trying to find answers, I realized that an individual's misfortune and anxiety don't originate chemically from within, but from our relationships with society and other people. Aside from the anxiety of making a living, distrust of others, insults, competitive relationships, and discrimination surround us constantly. We feel ashamed over insignificant things, intimidated by insults, and guard ourselves so we aren't ignored. This tension wears us out even before we solve existential problems, because we blame ourselves without cause. This book is meant to let you know there's no need to feel that way. It is support for those who may feel lonely amidst distrust, reminding you that it's okay to be proud of yourself. It is also a sign that someone still longs to live a humane life. To live without losing humanity in this cruel world, we must pay attention to ourselves and stand confidently against unfairness, insult, and anxiety. We must do our part, for ourselves, for others, and for a better society. To endure the cold gaze of others, resist envy, and live as who we truly are. I hope this helps you feel a little freer. Wish us a good fight. We can't be, and need not be, anything but ourselves. Heartfelt advice for novice adults. Don't worry about being miserable. Don't think problems are yours alone. Don't make excuses for yourself. Don't live to meet others' expectations. Don't blindly work hard out of anxiety. Don't let passers-by harm your life. Don't write a rubbish scenario for the future. Don't be swayed by what others say. Don't succumb to prescribed answers. Don't humble yourself to the point of intimidation. Live as who you are. Say goodbye to the past. Endure if you must. Live fully as yourself.
And that's the end of this book. Thank you so much for listening and sharing your time with this story. If you'd like to hear more, subscribing to the channel is the best way to stay updated. Your support means the world.